Good evening to all here, and I'm hoping everybody's with me. And just wanted to get a couple of technical things to the side before we went live. And of course, I see 111 already here to talk Iowa football with Coach Don Patterson, who is in our queue waiting to jump on. Just a couple of reminders before we get to the substance of our show for this evening. Just a reminder, when Coach Patterson is here, you are more than welcome to call in. You're more than welcome to be a part of this show. You as a listener, you as an Iowa fan are what helped to fuel this show, but I really want to take advantage of Coach Patterson's expertise. So we're going to try to keep our calls to somewhat of a minimum. Again, not number-wise, but length-wise. I know Iowa fans have a lot to say, and I understand why. Some of the feedback that we've gotten from the postgame show yesterday, paired with some of the feedback from a segment that we cut up and posted the channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm this morning. I can tell that Iowa fans are at a place that I don't know that they've been for 25 years, or maybe, again, I wasn't even around. I was barely a twinkle in my mother's eyes in 1990. Well, I was alive, but I was pretty young. Was not following the end of the Hayden Fry era, but I know some people have compared where we're at right now to the end of the Hayden era. I hope that's not the case for Coach Ferentz, but we're going to get to all the substance. We're going to get to the big questions that folks have. We'll talk about this game. Again, this is still Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. We did an Iowa postgame yesterday without Coach Patterson. But again, please be mindful of asking just a couple of questions. I don't want to cut you off, but try to be respectful of the limited time we have with Coach Patterson. With that being said, we are here for the next hour and a half or so. There's a link in the description below to jump on the show. You can have your video on, you can have it off, whatever. Treat it like a phone call, treat it like a video call, whatever you want to do. All right, with that being said, we're going to welcome Coach Patterson to the show. Good evening, Coach. How are you on this beautiful Sunday evening here in Iowa?
I'm doing all right, Corey. I hope you're doing the same.
I am. Beautiful day. Got to enjoy the weather today. A bit windy for my liking, but Don, when it's 80 degrees, you can deal with the wind. When it's 80 degrees in late October, you can deal with the wind.
That's true. Yeah, it's all good.
I got to ask you about your trip to Indiana. You were calling an FCS game this past weekend, or yesterday, I should say. How'd the trip go, and how'd the game go?
Well, it was a good game. It was a final of 27-21, so the game was in doubt right to the end. Indiana State had a pass thrown into the end zone right at the end of the game that was intercepted, but they certainly put up a good fight. They lost to a better team. I think statistically, Illinois State had won most statistical categories, and yet, as you know, sometimes the best team doesn't always win. You know, there's always a possibility you can make enough plays to make a difference, and it didn't happen that way for Indiana State, but they certainly gave it a good try.
Response to our viewer here, the phone numbers scrolling on the bottom, 515-635-1601. But we've just got one line open. So if you want to join and you don't want to have to keep calling in to try to catch the phone line open, join by StreamYard. Click the link in the description below. All right, below this video, you'll see it says join the show. You'll hit the link and you can be a part of the show. All right, Don, what I want to do to start this show, a little bit different than normal, but this is probably something we should be doing more often. I want to ask you about this game, and you and I discussed the game on Wednesday prior to the matchup, which we don't normally do on the air. But, of course, we had a bye week leading into this matchup with the Buckeyes. You and I both agreed that turnovers were going to be huge for Iowa to have any chance. They needed to be at least +3 would have given them a chance. In the end, I believe that without even having the box score in front of me, I'll pull it up here in a second. They were -4, correct, Don?
Correct.
You're not going to beat anybody with a -4 turnover margin, especially the best offense in the country. Can you just give our listeners an idea of what now that you've had a chance to look at the tape, what happened in this game, and just your overall takeaways from Iowa's trip to Columbus?
Just for the record, +4 in most years would be 100% win. That would be even a case of someone not nationally ranked playing someone that is. If you're +4, that would very likely be the difference and be able to tip the game your way. Here's some pertinent stats that come to mind for me, Corey. We were -4 on turnovers, and it's just terribly frustrating. 6 turnovers. I can't honestly say that Ohio State had as much to do with them as we did in many cases. And in that regard, they're unforced errors. I'll say it this way, as Joel Klatt was quoted as saying, I wrote it down even, the turning point in the game really was the pick 6 before the half. It was 19-10 at the time. It was 3:25 on the clock. I believe it was the first play of a series, if I'm not mistaken. And we threw the pick 6. And Joe Klatt's comment, I'll quote him now, I got no idea of what Petrus is looking at. That's coming from a former quarterback. And frankly, I don't know what he was looking at either, because I went back and looked at it as well as I could. Our back was over the ball. There was a linebacker on the side that he released through on the right side of our formation. There was a linebacker on that side. There was a vacated area on the other side. He logically went maybe a little bit past the ball, get some separation from the only linebacker that was in the box. And for whatever reason, Spencer threw the ball on the other side of the linebacker. The linebacker actually had a much better chance to get to it. He didn't have to do anything other than field it. And so it's just maddening. I went back and looked. I thought, well, maybe there's another receiver on the next level, an in route, a dig, as they call them. Maybe there was a deeper route he was trying to throw to, and he simply didn't see the linebacker underneath. But there is no one deeper. So it's mystifying to me as to why the ball was thrown in that direction, because there's no receiver anywhere near close to the ball. The only player near to the ball was the one wearing Ohio State colors, the linebacker, who returned it for a touchdown. So that was maddening, because at that point, we had to feel very, very fortunate through the great play of our defense, only be down 19-10. Let's face it, if we go in at halftime, down 9 points, we got a chance to win the game. I don't care who we're playing. And certainly we were in their head a little bit in that first half because they could not solve our defense. Let's talk about that for a minute, Corey, if we can. I think the thing that really made the difference, we were prepared to load the box and play man-free tight. Man coverage with a free safety deep in behind, but this is tight coverage. We're playing up on those receivers. And they really weren't prepared for that, I don't believe. They didn't handle it very well. There were a lot of times when they had difficulty getting off of our tight coverage. Did we ever get a flag on pass interference? I'm not sure we had one. Might have been one, but in general, as the officials saw it, we were certainly playing within the rules of the game.
And let me just ask you this question real quick. I had somebody, a Nebraska fan, reach out to me during the game, Cole, who's on here a lot, and he said it was absolutely pass interference on Cooper DeJean. And I absolutely disagree. I thought it was good coverage. And guess what? They're both grabbing each other, Don. That's where I think a no call is appropriate. Can we agree on that?
Well, the announcers didn't seem to have any difficulty with all the rulings. I can't remember a single one that they protested. I think they all were in agreement that it was probably a correct no call. Anyway, that was the turning point in the game, was the pick six right before the half. It looked to me like, at the very least, we could have been maybe conservative on that last possession, and maybe we would have had to punt to them, but the odds are they would have had such a long field, they wouldn't have been able to get a score in. So the good news, our red zone defense stepped up to the plate. And here's another positive for our defense. And Phil Parker talked about this, and he and I talked about it a couple of weeks earlier. You know, we were giving up more yards than what we were used to in the running game. And that gave us a good team like Michigan and a good running team like Illinois a chance to convert, a chance to keep us off the field, a chance to extend their drives. And of course, we gave up more yards than what we were used to in the running game. It's obvious, and Phil talked about it. Our defense worked on that in our off week, and they were prepared to defend the run better than they had in recent weeks, and they certainly got it done. I think the final yardage, I believe, for rushing was 66 yards. Is that right? That's pretty amazing that anybody holds Ohio State under 100 yards.
And think about that. And I said this during the show yesterday, and I want your opinion. And of course, we don't have the data to back this up yet. But I would venture to say that in all of not only Power 5, maybe even FBS, and I got to figure out the appropriate way to phrase this because I kind of butchered it yesterday. But my guess is that we will not see another game in all of the FBS all season where a team is held to 66 yards or less and yet gives up 54 points. My guess is that you're not going to see that anywhere.
Right. As you know, a good way to almost guarantee a win is to outrush your opponent. And if you only ran for 66, I don't know what we ran for.
We ran for more.
That's right. We actually outrushed them.
We outrushed them. Think about
what
that.
Are the odds? Although I will admit some of our yards came late.
And let's just hold on. I want to make this very clear, Don. We know that winning the rushing battle, you know, a lot of people think, well, how many yards you got to get? You got to get 100. You've made that very clear. The analytics actually say that outrushing your opponent is more important. In this case, it meant nothing, but let's give credit where credit is due. It's not like Iowa just outrushed them. The Iowa defense held them to, I believe, was it Mayan Williams averaged like 1.9 per carry?
I think so.
Yeah, that's an incredible number.
I did make a note, Corey, because I knew that Ohio State had field position in plus territory too many times to count, as you know. I've got them all written down here in order. The interception, the early interception, they started on the plus 29. It ended in a field goal. I believe it was a 3 and a kick. I don't think they had a first down, as I recall. The next possession, lost fumble. That was the strip sack on Spencer. They started on the plus 27, another field goal. The next time was the failed Torrey Taylor attempt on 4th and 6 for a gain of 4. They started that possession on the plus 34, another field goal. They then had a punt return that took them across midfield. They maybe fielded it even in plus territory. I can't recall, but a decent punt return that set them up on the plus 32, another field goal. There's 4 field goals in a row. And then the other turnover that I marked down, even though the defense didn't go on the field, the interception that resulted in the pick six. And the way I figure average starting field position, if this will make sense to you, Corey, I think we've talked about it. Let's imagine you return the interception to the 1 yard line. I'm talking about 1 yard from a touchdown. Statistically, they would say, well, that's the equivalent of the 99-yard line, right? When you figure average starting field position. So using that awareness, I simply state, okay, if you score a touchdown, I'm going to count that as field position gained to the 100-yard line. Hope that makes sense to you. That's the better way of figuring average starting field position,
right?
Because statistically the NCAA doesn't do that, and that's not the best way to do it. So when you factor all that in, they had 4 legitimate possessions, all that started on average at the 30.5 yard line, 30 yards away from pay dirt, and all they had to show for those 4 possessions was 4 field goals. That's darn good defense. Some in the red zone, some outside the red zone. What we call the high red zone, between the 20 and the 30 is what we refer to as the high red zone. Outstanding defense, any way you slice it. So that's the good news is we passed the test against Ohio State. Here's another way to look at the game. Think about this. They ended up with 9 touchdowns. Of course, one of them was a defensive score. But regardless of that, think of it this way. 9 touchdowns, all accomplished on only 360 yards total offense. And if you think of it that way, every 6 points, every touchdown, they only had to gain 40 yards to earn the touchdown. 9 touchdowns in 360 yards of total offense. Typically, if you get 9 touchdowns, you got to be over 500.
Yeah.
And yet it only took 360 to get that done against us.
And Don, let me just say this, and I'm caught up, of course. I was caught up just in the result of the game. I was actually taken aback when I looked at the stat sheet after the game, and I saw the total number of rushing yards. I saw a total number of yards gained for Ohio State in the game. Did that surprise you? I mean, I know you looked because of your engagement on Saturday. You probably looked at the stat sheet before you watched the game.
I did.
Did it feel like, I mean, the first half, I tweeted out at halftime. I said, this defense has been phenomenal in the first half. I don't know. I'll be honest, Don. I know they didn't create a ton of turnovers, although they did have the Joe Evans play, which is quite a play. I don't know when did the Jack Campbell interception happen? Was that first half?
It was the first play of the second half.
Okay. So my point being, though, that first half, I thought that might have been their most complete defensive performance for a half in the entire season. And that says something given what they've done.
Especially when you factor in the group you're going against.
Exactly.
No one saw that coming. And here's the halftime stats. At the half, we had 67 yards total offense. It didn't feel so terrible because Ohio State only had 133.
Wow.
And this is a team that averages over 500 yards a game. So outstanding play, especially in the first half. And then we start the second half with a great interception by Jack Campbell. Textbook stuff. You can see, and Joe Clett did a good job of explaining zone defense. Eyes are trained on the quarterback. If the quarterback's eyes move, then the defender moves in that direction. And that gives Jack Campbell a chance to get a good jump on the ball. And he still wouldn't have gotten it if he hadn't been tall enough to get a piece of the ball. Of course, he had to tip it to begin with before he intercepted it. Incidentally, their quarterback is good. There were a few balls that were really well defended, and he barely got them over the underneath coverage. Merriweather comes to mind. I thought Kayvon played an outstanding game. And I don't even know what the stats were, the final stats in terms of tackles and all. But 2 guys that stood out to me were Jack Campbell and Kayvon Merriweather. Those 2 guys in particular.
And I thought Cooper DeJean played well, Don. I mean, it's a big moment for him. I know he got beat over the top on 1 or 2, but yeah, I said this, Don. I was complimenting the defense, and somebody yesterday said, well, you're trying to take it away from Ohio State. No, I'm going to make it clear. I was absolutely impressed with the Buckeyes. They may be the best team in the country. I'll root for them when they're in the playoff. I think they'll get to the playoff. I think they'll beat Michigan, for the record. I hate that to say that to Michigan fans. Now, maybe Michigan will win. But based on the 2 performances, I was a little bit more impressed with Ohio State. And I thought Iowa's defense played a lot better yesterday than they did against Michigan. Specifically, obviously, in the run game, you could argue that. But I was very impressed with Stroud. He's a pro. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a pro. Julian Fleming's a pro. We didn't even get to see much of Jackson Smith and Jigba, who may be the best receiver in the country, as he went out. I'm assuming he aggravated the hamstring.
It appeared that way, yeah.
impressed all around. And I did have a couple. There's a question here in the chat, Don, that I wanted to get to. And again, we'll get to some more questions. This is a good one from ZJ. He says, question for Coach Patterson. Teams are still jumping Iowa snap count, so why would a coach not either change that up or start incorporating hard counts so it makes it harder on the D to do that? Great question from ZJ.
I have no good response. You heard me say 2 weeks ago, rather, you heard me say, we have an off week now. Now's the time to enter hard counts to vary our snap counts. There's a lot of different snap counts you can go with. But obviously, the one that's the most important is be able to snap the ball and hold your water on what we call a hard count. You know, we so often go on the first sound, whatever the cadence is. The first definable sound is typically when the ball gets snapped. So if you go later than that, invariably you'll catch a defense, unless you shoot yourself in the foot and false start on your side of the ball. And with the off week, that was a great opportunity to get that entrenched into the offense. We don't vary our snap counts enough. That's for sure the case, and that's one reason that they do a good job. It didn't seem, of course, they didn't stun as much as Minnesota and Illinois. I think both those teams probably stunted more against us. It didn't seem like they were timing up their stunts quite as well as the other two, but it's safe to say they had a good idea of when the ball was going to be snapped, and they did get a good jump any number of times. One other comment I will make, this will make sense to you, Corey, makes sense to the listeners too. One of the things I hate about going empty, let's face it, and even with Padilla, we didn't demonstrate that we want to run Q draw with him either. So when you go empty, it's kind of obvious that you're planning to throw the ball because we haven't run Q draw hardly ever. And even if we run it, of course, neither guy's the greatest runner in the world at quarterback. So basically, when you go empty, you're inviting that defensive line to absolutely get into a track stance and to fly up the field. It doesn't matter what the down and distance is. If there's nobody in the backfield with the quarterback, I think it's pretty safe to say if it's not 100% pass, it's the next thing to it. You know, are we going to run a Q draw one time out of 100? Well, maybe with Spencer, maybe not even one time. With Padilla, maybe we would, going forward, we would maybe demonstrate that we had some faith in his ability to run Q draw. But the bottom line is, I think that's when we struggled the most with our pass protection, is when we were empty. And the reasons in my mind are kind of obvious. There's nobody back there to run the ball. And so now they are going to get into a staggered stance and they are going to fly up the field. And our tackles did struggle against their edge rushers. No shock there, you know, because they have good edge players. And incidentally, I couldn't help but notice Plum played a ton. I guess you're aware of that.
Yeah, I believe Connor got pulled relatively early.
Or yeah,
inside. Did he get moved?
He moved inside. He moved to right guard. Yeah, you're exactly right. Kobe struggled. He had a couple of bad sets against their edge rusher early in the game. They moved him inside. They brought Plum in. I don't know who played better. They both struggled at times, certainly.
And let me just say this: I'm not throwing Plum under the bus, but we're talking about an individual lineman struggling, and he did. We can say Petrus has struggled. Obviously, Padilla struggled in the second half. We can talk about that. But I just want to make this and dispel the notion that Iowa's line is young. Jack Plum is struggling individually, and Don, he's a fifth-year senior. So I don't want to hear the people who say that's the youth is the reason. He's a sixth-year senior. I'm not ripping the kid, but that's a fact.
Right. And let's not forget why we are classified as young. You've documented very, very accurately, Corey. We recruit offensive linemen every year. If we're young, it either suggests that older players are on the bench or older players are no longer in the program. And we have a little bit of both. We have a lot of guys that are no longer in the program. That's unfortunate. And maybe it's just as well because maybe they didn't pan out as we hoped. Who knows what the reasons might be. But the bottom line, we're young simply because those guys we recruited have not come through for us like we hoped in the offensive line.
All right, Don, we're going to get to a phone call here from Luca is the GOAT. Okay. Caller, who are you and where are you calling from? Hello, you're on the air. Hello, you're on the air. Going once.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, you're on the air with Coach Patterson.
Well, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. So one thing I'm really frustrated with, especially how Kirk Ferentz plays, because I agree. I think Kirk Ferentz should stay for another year. I really don't like how the people are saying he should be fired. I think he should stay another year. Any thoughts?
Kirk?
Yes.
I made it very clear earlier today, a segment I posted. I'm not calling for Kirk to be fired right now, young man. I'm not. Don, I don't think you are either.
No.
But I also am not going to judge someone else who is, because that's their right as a paying fan. That's their right. You don't want him to be fired either, young man. What's your name, by the way? What's your first name?
Jack.
Jack. Yeah, I'm not calling for that. I've called for Brian to be relieved of his duties. I think it's time for that. I think that's clear. I don't know anybody in their right mind who believes that Brian deserves to retain his position. I don't think is an objective fan at all. And I don't know. I mean, if you're a fan and you want this offense to do better, I don't know how you can deal with 2 straight years of, being one of, if not the worst offense. I mean, right now they are arguably the worst offense in the country. So, no, I'm not calling for Jack to be fired, or Jack to be fired. I'm not calling for you to be fired, Jack. I'm not calling for Kirk to be fired either. Anything else for Coach?
Yeah. I don't think it's Petrus's fault why the offense was being bad, like you said earlier. I think it's really on the offensive line, because if they gave him more time, I think he could do better. Do you think so?
Jack, if you throw it to their players when you're not under great duress, I have a real problem with that, because that's no way to play football. And there were a couple of balls that are unexplainable that simply were thrown almost directly to a defender. You saw the game, right, Jack?
Yes.
You remember those plays I'm talking about?
Yeah, I saw the whole game. Yeah.
Yeah, those shouldn't happen. So let's not let Spencer off the hook. Spencer certainly had a lot to do with our problems. It doesn't nearly all fall into his lap, but he's certainly as much of the problem as anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think, Brian made the bad decision putting Padilla in when I really think he should have put him at the start of the second half against the game against South Dakota State. Yeah.
Yeah, at the very least, he should have played against Nevada. He should have gotten his feet wet against Nevada. The idea that his first snaps would come against Ohio State in the shoe, that's not a great place to take your first snap of the season, that's for sure.
All right, Jack.
That's everything I had to say. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call. Always appreciate our young, that's a future of Iowa fan base, Don, right there.
Please tell me, Corey, if I was too hard on Jack.
No. I mean, look, there's a lot of criticism to Spencer, but a lot of it is, I hate to say this, Don, but you're a former quarterbacks coach. A lot of it is deserved. Now, you also have acknowledged objectively that quarterbacks oftentimes take too much heat, but I don't think you're saying that Spencer's the only problem, but he's been a big part of the problem.
That's correct.
And some of that, Don, I'll argue, is not his fault directly, or I should say maybe indirectly, because it's clear that this quarterback room is not real strong. I think that's clear. Like Alex Padilla should have played against Nevada. You and I both agree with that. You and I have talked off the air that we both agree that Alex, I think, gives you something that you don't have with Spencer. I think that's obvious, and mobility. But the bottom line is this is not a quarterback room with a ton. I mean, compare this quarterback room to, say, 2013 with Jake Rudock, C.J. Beathard, and Cody Sokol. Those are miles. I mean, those two quarterback rooms are miles apart. So that falls back on – you're a former quarterbacks coach. If your room as a whole is way underperforming, who does that fall on? Does that fall on the players, Don, or does that fall on you as the QB's coach?
As a coach, you always take responsibility for how well your players play. That's exactly what Coach Fry would say. I'm not upset with the quarterbacks. I'm upset with the guy coaching the quarterbacks. They're not playing nearly well enough. And so you do take responsibility for that. That's That's what any coach typically does.
And that's why I was waiting for somebody yesterday to say, well, I told you that Padilla wouldn't solve all the problems. I've never claimed that Padilla would solve all the problems. You've never claimed that, Don. We both agreed that it would could help some of the issues, but the issues are deeper seated than just who's the starting quarterback. Not only does it have to do with the quarterback position, but we're talking about wide receiver play. We're talking about offensive line play, etc. All right, let's go to Berger, who's on the line. Berger, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing really well. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing good, and I'm sorry, man. I always forget your real name.
I'm sorry. I should just put it in there. Micah Hirschberger. Micah.
I recognize your last name because I knew a Hirschberger. Or maybe I can't know if it was Hirschberger or Harshberger. I don't know.
Actually, there are both in Iowa, so
yeah.
Probably both are true, yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the show, Mike. I appreciate you calling in.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. I wanted to ask two questions, and the first relates to just the overall state of the program because, I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, but I'll give credit to Chris Johnston from Sportsnet. I think he summarized fan bases everywhere in one sentence. He said, fans want a winning team or a plan. And, obviously since the Penn State game last year, we haven't really had the winning. And I think that the trust in the plan has slowly been eroding. And especially with the offseason when, we didn't hit the transfer portal, all that stuff, all the stuff we've already talked about. I'll add to Chris Johnston's statement by saying, I think there's one thing you cannot do to a fan base, and that's embarrass them. And I feel like yesterday was kind of a turning point. I feel like that was the first time where we've really been embarrassed as a program, where I don't know if you saw the Twitter sphere after the game, but it was brutal and it was funny. I mean, it was accurate, but a lot of the things that Francis said were used against him. And I mean, everyone from all corners of the nation were tweeting about Iowa's offense and lack of production. And my question out of that is, do you feel like maybe yesterday was a paradigm shift for this program, that just with the way it all went down, with how bad it was and how good this defense played, do you feel like Barta is going to be in a position where he has to do something mid-season or potentially at the end of the season, but that it'll start affecting things like attendance, recruiting, boosters, things like that? Do you feel like we've hit that point?
Is that a question for me or Coach Patterson, Micah?
Well, either or. I mean, I'd appreciate both of your insights on that.
Go ahead, Coach.
I would say for sure that the results yesterday put us trending more in that direction than we've ever been before. But having said that, a lot of people are going to be able to rationalize and say, well, we're playing very possibly the best team in the country, and that's true. Ohio State's that good. I think they will be a Final Four team, and maybe they can win the whole thing. They certainly have a chance to. But having said that, we're looking at Northwestern a week from yesterday. Obviously, if you really want to lose some sleep, think about how we're going to feel if Northwestern somehow manages to wrestle the win away from us. I don't see that happening, certainly. Northwestern has more problems than we do, but we all know that Pat Fitzgerald's a good coach too, and they certainly have a lot of wisdom and a lot of great work ethic on their side, just as we do. And as you know about football, sometimes the best team doesn't win the game. That's a scary thought, but it's true. And there are exceptions to any rule that back that up. I'll give you an example.
Let me just say this. I want to make it clear that Ohio State, I think it's clear Ohio State was the best team yesterday. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah,
sure.
It's painfully clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trending in that direction, Micah, but I'm not sure that we're there yet. Obviously, everybody went into the game yesterday prepared for the possibility that they're going to do a number on us, and they did. But of course, that score is really misleading. You know what's tragic to me? We've given up, going into the game, we've given up 59 points in 6 games. And now all of a sudden we give up 54 in 1 game. And yet it's hard to assign much of the blame to the defense because they really fought valiantly. Think about this. You've heard me say before, our goal typically should be to try to hold the other team to maybe 10 possessions in the course of the game. Ohio State had 16 possessions. You know, we couldn't stay on the field, not to mention the turnovers, of course, gave us a really quick exit sometimes from certain possessions. So my point is, if Ohio State has 16 opportunities, well, think of it this way, Micah. Are you aware that before our game, their starting unit, somebody had this stat, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it was what was being discussed. Their starting unit had scored touchdowns in 30 out of the last 38 possessions. Yeah. That's amazing. I do know this. In the red zone, they were almost 100% on touchdowns. They didn't kick field goals. That poor kicker had only kicked 3 field goals all year, and here he is kicking 4 in the first half. So,
well, I think though that's part of what's maybe driving some of the current emotions surrounding this game is that I think most people acknowledge how great the defense performed. I mean, to hold Ohio State, I mean, giving them every opportunity in the world to score touchdowns, and they can only come away with field goals. And you could see they were frustrated. Stroud was frustrated, and it's like the defense doesn't deserve this, and it makes the specific issue of the offensive struggles, it makes those far more pronounced because the defense is playing so well. And of course that brings up, people's being able to identify. They've really honed in on the issue of nepotism, that word, as kind of the source of all the problems that are, all the embarrassment, all the problems come down to that one thing. And now that's really what people have laser focused on, even in the media now, calling for changes to be made. So I didn't know, but I mean, it sounds like you think we're still maybe a little bit of ways from that.
I think so, because we all know this. Ohio State has the potential to embarrass anyone that they play against. Yeah. And they embarrassed us, and yet it really wasn't as it appeared to be. If you have 54 points, you typically have a lot more than 360 yards offense.
Yeah, that was my second question was specifically for you, Coach. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the opening few drives, how the plays were kind of laid out. The first play, I think, from scrimmage was like a bootleg to Spencer Petrus's left side.
It was what we call a sprint pass. He was in the gun. He simply took the ball and started sprinting in that direction. I probably shouldn't use the term sprint. We refer to it as a sprint pass, but he's moving under control to put himself in position to make that throw.
But I don't remember him really being a good thrower on the run, especially to his left. Did that play call surprise you? And obviously it didn't turn out very well. But how did you feel about the play calling? I guess the first number of scripted plays, how Brian Ferentz had outlaid that versus how Spencer Petrus executed it.
Right. Well, here's what's kind of telling. You're aware, Micah, of what a naked is? Naked, of course, you'd fake a wide play one direction, typically a fairly wide hitting play, an outside zone type of run, and then you'd roll away from the original fake, right? That's why they call it a naked, because you're actually typically you're suckering a guy on the backside. You're not blocking him. Mm-hmm. The reason I bring it up, our nakeds are almost always to the right for obvious reasons, right-handed quarterbacks. And yet we do sprint pass or roll pass, whatever you want to call it. He has taken the ball in the gun and moved outside under control, but we still refer to it as a sprint pass. In other words, he's moved the launch point. He's no longer snapping the ball behind the center, right? And even then, typically, he's more comfortable rolling right and throwing. I guarantee he's spreaded more to the right than the left. You're right. You're correct on that. It was odd to start the game by sprinting to the left because that is not his strength. And that didn't have anything to do with the interception, I don't think, simply because that was just a classic case of a poor receiver choice. The ball should have never been thrown. You got to see the defenders, right? That defender, all I can think of looking back at it, I think Spencer incorrectly identified it as some kind of man coverage. He thought that the outside receiver was one-on-one, and that was all that we had to worry about, was that outside defender making a play on that receiver. That's why he felt confidence in throwing it. What happened, though, the guy lined up over the inside receiver. Turned out he was a flat receiver. The receiver went up inside of him. That defender moved to the flat because he's responsible for the flat. And, of course, we threw the ball right to him. So it's inexcusable, of course, that the quarterback would not see that defender because he was truly in the line of sight. I can't explain why the ball was thrown, other than maybe Spencer just was a little bit mentally weak, and that he simply thought it was man coverage, and it clearly wasn't. It was zone.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like? No, that makes perfect sense. I noticed that too because I paused the game a lot at the beginning and watched the playback, and it seemed to me like Spencer Petras was locking in on one guy far too quick, and then you'd watch the defenders read the play and they just watch his eyes the whole time. Do you feel like maybe, I mean, as far as the play calling itself goes, though, if you could take out Spencer Petras and put in, let's say, just a random quarterback who can read defenses well, maybe just your average college football quarterback, do you feel like that the play calling itself, in that first part of the game especially, was up to snuff, or how did you feel about the play calling?
Well, there's or
is it irrelevant because of the quarterback?
Well, there's a strong reliance. We have so much faith in Sam, and Sam, I think, is the best tight end in the conference, and that's saying a lot because we have a lot of good tight ends in this league. Obviously, Spencer has great confidence in Sam, but here's another example that maybe you missed. It was early in the game. It was 3rd and 7, and I've got it written down here. What I would classify as why follow. Let me explain what why follow is. Sam is an inside receiver, and he starts off as if he's working outside, working a route to the outside of the field. In the meantime, the number 2 receiver, it was a trips formation. The number 2 receiver runs inside. It happened to be, it was Arlen Bruce. It was Arlen Bruce. If you go back and look at that play, the backside linebacker vacated. He was on a rush. The front side linebacker actually let Bruce go. Bruce is wide open. If you go back and see the TV tape, if he would have caught the ball on the run, I think he'd have gained, who knows, maybe 15, 20 yards. It would have been a significant gain. It would have easily made our first down because there wasn't anybody in front of him. He would have had a chance to catch
15 to 20 yards, Don, but we also had, I believe, 2 receivers that could have blocked 2 defenders. I don't believe there were more than 2 defenders on that side of the field. So he may have gotten more.
And also,
you're right.
I saw that play that you're mentioning. Did you notice, too, that the referee, he saw Arlen Bruce coming across, and he actually started moving up, anticipating that Arlen Bruce was going to be in his spot. He was like anticipating that pass. It was like the only person who didn't quite see it was Spencer Petras.
Yeah. So Bruce is wide open. He's the first guy to cross the ball. He's the only guy to cross the ball because what happened on that particular play, Sam started off as if he were running to the flat, but he quickly put on his brakes and retraced inside. That's why we call it why follow. He's following Bruce across the field. The thought being, of course, the first guy that is headed across the ball will drag the defender inside and will hit Sam on a short throw, but it'll pick up the first down yardage. That's a good thought, but still you have to read the defender that's in that part of the field. That defender ignored Arlen Bruce, and he's sitting there waiting on Sam, wasn't he? It's a ball that was in danger of actually being intercepted. The defender was right there when the ball came to Sam. He was right there with him. And, of course, it was broken up, and we had to punt, and that was the end of that series. That might have been our opening series, come to think of it. I believe it was. I believe that was our first.
I mean, just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to stop. I
I
know
take
we
it back. It was a second possession because Ohio State had a ball that Quinn Schulte was looking at the man rather than the quarterback one time, and the ball almost hit. And Quinn actually touched the ball, but he didn't realize it was coming. That's the ball that got away from us. He was eyeballing the defender rather than the flight of the ball and missed out on an interception opportunity there. Let's move forward a little bit. Let's talk about something more positive for a second. And you've touched on it already, Corey. I'm kind of mystified about the call, but it worked. That's the point. I'm talking about Joe Evans for his touchdown. It's odd to me. That's the first play of the series. I believe that's the first play they ran. Is that right? Or they had another possession before?
that. I don't know. You'd know
Not
better.
sure. Anyway, it was early. No, it had to be really early because it happened in the first 2 minutes of the game. Anyway, we ran, for whatever reason, we ran what we would refer to as a twist stunt. The inside defender, the defensive tackle, ran up the field and gained width, and Joe wrapped inside, right? And he freed up. The guard went with our inside rusher, and there was a nice little lane for Joe. And it was just so neat what Joe did. Joe wasn't just content with tackling the guy. He hit him as hard as he could right there where the ball was, right there in his chest. The ball pops out, of course, and Joe has the presence of mind. You've seen a lot of defenders do this. They make a great play, and they're so preoccupied with how special they feel, they have to get up and be sure the crowd knows that they're the one that made the play. Joe didn't do that. Joe had the presence of mind to realize the ball's out. I'm not worried about celebrating. I'm worried about getting into the end zone with that football. And what a neat play for Joe. I was so happy for Joe because he's a great young man, and that was a big-time play. And sadly to say, of course, that was 6 of our 10 points. The PAT followed. And the good news, I guess, if you're a defensive fan, that's our third defensive touchdown to go with a couple of safeties. So that's something to be proud of. And the bad news, of course, is our defense once again outscored our offense. I think it's happened 3 times now.
Let me just interrupt real quick. Don, can I get you to push your camera down a little bit? That's the first thing, just so I don't want to cut your. There we go. That's better. Micah, I got to let you slide. I'm getting that stressed look on my face because I got callers piling up. So, I appreciate you because you're always here and you're one of our premium subscribers. So, again, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
No, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's move on to Michael, who's been on hold for quite some time. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on, man.
Doing good. I think you're a first-time caller, at least over. Good to have you here.
Michael, is that a Georgia Bulldog on your head, or is that?
Yeah, I'm from Georgia. I'm from Georgia, but I follow Iowa football just because I'm a college football fan. So decided to follow you guys for the last few years. Pretty fun. But I did have a few questions for you, Coach Patterson. Earlier in the game, when Padilla went in, Iowa went 5 wide, and I was a little confused, about why they had decided to do that, just because I didn't think it fit the offense's strengths. But also, was that a game plan that you think was drawn up for Padilla? Or I guess I'm asking, do you think they had 2 different game plans depending on the quarterback or how that would work? Because you've game planned before, obviously.
I have my doubts that was a place for Padilla, and I say that primarily because we'd gone empty any number of snaps in the first half. So I think that was just part of our plan to go empty. And you've heard me say already, maybe it bothers me that we're giving those edge rushers a little advance warning. Hey, it's a pass, So here they come. Need to be able to run Q draw if you're going to go empty.
Yeah, it didn't seem to make sense to me, which is why I wanted to ask you about it. Also, I guess I had another question related to Padilla. Do you think they had gone into this game with that in the back of their mind as a possibility, simply because I feel like he probably should have gotten snaps earlier in the season if that was a possibility, I guess?
Well, I think we all thought there's a fair chance that Padilla is going to play in this game. Simply because there's the possibility that the score gets out of hand. Let's imagine it was 54-17 late in the game. Then it makes sense, of course, to get your starters out rather than have one injured late in the game when the outcome of the game is already settled. So I think in that regard, I think Padilla went into the game aware that this might be my first opportunity for playing time, probably for the reason that The outcome of the game's already settled, and here we are, getting some of our key starters out of the game because the outcome's already known.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. And then I just had a comment about everyone who's saying to fire Brian Ferentz, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. I just didn't think it made sense.
I haven't just heard about it, Michael. I've said it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, I was going to say, obviously, this can't continue. And I've noticed Iowa fans are a rather jaded bunch in that they don't think they don't think changes will be made. I would be shocked if changes weren't made. I just don't think it makes sense to fire him in the middle of the season. I don't see what added benefit you would get. I would just wait out the
I'll tell you what the added benefit is, Michael. I'll tell you why. Okay. Why I'm an advocate for, and it's a great question. And Don, you can comment on it if you want. But this is why I actually think it would maybe help Iowa. And I agree with you. In most cases, that probably isn't going to turn anything around. Now, we have seen coordinators fired. We saw Rutgers fire their offensive coordinator. Will it help? I have no idea. The reason why I believe it's viable for Iowa is they have a guy they're currently paying like $600,000 to do very little, and his name is Ken O'Keefe, and he's worked with Kirk Ferentz for decades. So you have a guy there, and assuming Ken would be willing to come out of retirement for 5 games, you have a guy there that could come in there. And, people weren't thrilled with Ken O'Keefe's offenses either, but they're much better. Now, he had better personnel, I get it. But my point is they do have somebody they can feasibly plug and play. I don't think John Budmeyer is the answer. He's not proven anything to me. He just got here in the summer, I guess spring. I think Ken O'Keefe is a feasible option of a guy you can bring back for 5 games.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. And I understand where you're coming from, too. And again, there's obviously coaches like Kirk Ferentz who have, I believe Kirk, I'd have to go back at his record. I don't think he has fired anybody during the season. So he is consistent on that. Now, some people look at him and say, well, he's not doing it because it's his son. I can't say either way. I mean, he hasn't done it in the past, but have we ever seen a performance from an assistant coach this bad in his tenure? That's also, that might be the one thing that needs to be added into this discussion as well. So I get where you're coming from. Kirk would agree with you, but there are other coaches out there who have made moves and clearly disagree that it's worth making a move during a season.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's an extraordinarily poor performance on the offensive side of the ball. And I guess the last thing before I get out of here, I'm of the opinion that programs are more defined by their bad years than their good years. And I mean that as Iowa as a whole program, not just Kirk Ferentz, for example. So I was going to say that if Iowa can make a bowl game in a year where their offense is this bad, that certainly sets a pretty strong floor in a way. I just wanted to point that out, that if you can win 6 games in a year where things are going disastrously, that's not the worst place to be. So just a little optimism for some of this stuff. I've watched bad seasons before. I mean, it happens. So it's just one of those years.
Appreciate the call, Michael. I'll call anytime. Yeah. You're welcome.
Bye.
All right. Let's get to our next caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line. Hey, Pat.
Corey, can you hear the caller? Because I cannot.
Pat, we're apparently having an issue.
Now you're back. Now I can hear you.
Pat, can you talk again? Maybe we're not hearing you on our end. Yeah, we're not getting you. I can hear you. I can hear you on my end, but apparently Don and the callers cannot. So we've had this issue before. I thought it was resolved, but Pat, are you able to call in by way of StreamYard? Okay, well, go ahead and give me your question, and I'll repeat it back to Don. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to hang up, Pat, but I appreciate the question, and I'll forward it on to Don. All right, Coach. So again, apologize. Apparently, the phone line's having an issue again. So people can still join by StreamYard. Not sure why it's having an issue. Anyways, his question, Don, was how much confidence can Alex have when he hasn't played all season, hasn't gotten a snap all season? And of course, Pat was also expressing his frustration with putting him in a position where if you're going to throw him out there during the middle of the game at Ohio State in that position. You and I had that conversation after the game as well. Just your thoughts on Alex Padilla, his first actual minutes of actual snaps of the season.
Well, it's a very difficult spot to put any backup quarterback in. The other thing that comes to mind for me, it's not too far removed from a comment that Brian made a while back in time that I don't think did anything for Alex's confidence level either. You know, the rhetorical question was, what's the upside, you might recall. I don't think Brian meant it that way, but I could understand that a lot of people might interpret it that way, and that it would simply, by asking that rhetorical question, what's the upside, that suggests that Brian might think there is no upside. So that was unfortunate that happened back in time. It's disappointing, of course, that Padilla didn't play better. Things that I wonder about. Here's an obvious question. You might recall, of course, the interception on the first play of the second half, and then Padilla's on the field, and we promptly mishandled the snap. The really obvious question, how many snaps did Padilla take with Logan Jones before they went on the field? Maybe this is old school, the way we did it, but we always took snaps. I don't care if it was our starting quarterback and our starting center that are both going to start the second half. They would still take a couple of snaps on the sideline before going on the field, just to be sure that people are on the same page. And I wonder for starters, how much he's worked with Logan, how many snaps he's taken with Logan. I'm talking about direct snaps, when he's underneath the center.
Kirk did say for the record, Don, that they were taking snaps in the locker room or at halftime.
Good. That's good to know, because that's what should have been happening. I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't know. I actually looked back trying to look at the bench, and I thought, well, Ohio State turned the ball over on the first play. It's conceivable that because they were rushed on the field right at that moment, that maybe they didn't even take any snaps outside. But I'm glad to hear that snaps were taken. So, and that just proves that you can't guarantee anything. Just because you can snap the ball and put the ball up consistently on the sideline or in the locker room doesn't mean you can do it in a game. So that was unfortunate. That was another unforced error. Too many of our turnovers were not great plays by Ohio State. They were very poor plays by us. I'll give you, just not to pick on any particular player, but Gavin Williams. We run a draw for good yardage, but the ball's in the wrong arm. The ball's in his inside arm. As he works toward the boundary, the ball should be in his outside arm. And sure enough, the fumble is caused by a tackler coming from inside. The ball's in the wrong arm. That's just fundamental football. So that was unfortunate.
I'm just curious, Don. Why is that? What does that tell you? If we're struggling with the basic fundamentals of things like that, I mean, I understand kids make mistakes and sometimes fundamentals are forgotten, but it seems like that you have made that clear on plays throughout the season with this offense that we're lacking fundamentals. I remember having this conversation last year about line play. We can talk about strength and conditioning all we want, but I remember you, for a fact, you going on the record and saying that you've seen, O-line guru, but you have observed even last year, I was struggling with fundamental O-line play and technique. Is that accurate, that we're seeing a lot of fundamental issues with the offense, not just personnel and play calling and whatnot?
Well, if you have an issue with fundamentals, those have to be solved over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of repetitions. I was going to say thousands maybe, but maybe that's too extreme. After a few hundred repetitions, you would like to think that it's almost second nature.
Yeah.
But some people, obviously, it becomes more ingrained quicker than with others. And the bottom line, if it's not second nature, then you need to continue to take steps to make it second nature so that the ball is in the right arm. I know Carl Jackson, as a backfield coach, if the ball is in the wrong arm, he would be quick to point out, hey, where are all the tacklers? All the tacklers are back inside. It would be nice if you demonstrated that you were aware of that by putting your ball in your outside arm. So you can have a free arm to fight off tacklers. And of course, the ball is less exposed to a hard hit at that point either. So that's just one unfortunate aspect of yesterday's game. And I'm not trying to beat up on Gavin. I'm just pointing out the mistakes that we're making, with the hope, of course, that we'll be able to eliminate them over time.
Real quick before we get to our next caller, Don, and just so everybody's aware, people who are waiting in the queue, I got you in order. You're going to get on the air here. Just hang tight and watch the show through StreamYard. What about the Caleb Johnson fumble, Don? What'd you see on that one?
That was the sixth turnover. I'm trying to think. I just had it down, fumble lost by Caleb Johnson. I can't remember the play very well. Help me out with the play.
I believe it was a stretch left. It was run off tackle left, correct?
The ball wasn't his outside arm. It was right over on the boundary, wasn't it? Yeah, the ball wasn't his outside arm. I thought it was mostly just a really good play by the Ohio State defender. Okay. It was a tackler coming from inside, but he did get his arm all the way through to the ball, even though the ball was away from him. We were unlucky there that the ball stayed in bounds, of course. It was right there on the boundary. So that one I didn't, let's face it, football's an inexact game, and accidents do happen. And I would classify that more as a good play by Ohio State than a bad play by Caleb.
Let's get to Yakov22, who's been on hold for quite some time. Yakov22, how you doing, sir?
Hello, guys. Well, first of all, it was no problem being on hold. I would have held until I would have watched the show another hour or so.
Appreciate that, man.
Well, I'll say this, guys. I mean, I guess obviously I'm a Ohio State fan and alum, but I'm not calling to rub anything in or something. I think enough. That's not my style by any means. I like the show. First of all, I like Iowa. I'll cheer for them 11 games this year. There's only one game I didn't want them to win. They've been 11-1 this year. I've been okay with that, but it's not going to quite be 11 wins. But actually, Coach, I wanted to ask you something. I'll tell you guys something from the Ohio State fans' perspective. I've watched. There's no show like you guys. I can't find a show that has a former, how long time Ohio State football coach that pairs with someone and discusses the game. So you guys definitely have a unique situation going there. One of the things that Ohio State fans were commenting on or saying to various hosts, again, not necessarily a coach or former player, but they felt that in the first half, Iowa was doing a great job of forcing field goals. That perhaps from last year, Ohio State had some trouble. They could pass it, no problem, but they had a lot of problems running the ball when they really had to. So Coach Day this year said, we're going to be tough. We're running the ball, which has been pretty successful except for this game, especially the first half.
Right.
But Coach, what I want to ask is, you mentioned earlier that they were loading the box, and Ohio State was determined to unsuccessfully run anyway. What I want to ask is, and the Ohio State fans were saying we should have just thrown it on every play. I guess I want to ask, Coach, were they really selling out to stop the run? Again, I was just watching a TV copy. I know you have far more keen eye for things, even if you're just watching on TV. And secondly, was it because they didn't feel that the receivers were getting open, or was it just the fact that Iowa said we're stopping the run, and Ohio State said we're running anyway?
I don't want to misrepresent what happened. The truth of it is, we packed the box mostly in short yardage situations, and Ohio State did still try to run for a first down and had difficulty doing it. We didn't play man free tight all day long, not even close. We used our zone concepts the majority of the snaps, but we did selectively pick out certain key snaps to load the box and play man free tight. We did that. That was good decision on Phil Parker's part, because it did have good success.
It was a good idea because maybe he knew something that Coach Day this year said, we got to be tough. We have to run when they know we're going to run. And it didn't work so good, in the first half. Probably should have passed a bit more.
Well, and to their credit, now you might recall in those short yardage situations, they threw the ball a fair amount too, but without much success. The press coverage was a problem for them. I thought our guys did a good job, and we had the extra week to practice it before we pulled it out and used it yesterday. And I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call for the Ohio State receivers. They had some difficulty getting separation from our defenders. But I give them a lot of credit. There were still some really nice throws that were made. Corey, you mentioned the long touchdown to Fleming, 79 yards. My
Beautiful.
comment, decent coverage, too much outside leverage. He was sitting outside. There was no help inside. It was actually a good effort by Cooper, but it was a really nice throw. Cooper tried to undercut the receiver. He almost made a play on the ball, but the ball was just pretty much perfectly thrown. And it hit him in dead stride, and, of course, it ended up in the end zone.
And Don, real quick, address this comment on screen from Danzo626. Go to the tape, watch closely on the Petrus INT before half. JT hit his elbow as he threw, which caused it to go to the linebacker. Did you see that, Don? I did not.
I did not. I actually went back and looked at it. I'll look at it again, but I don't think so.
So, Coach, I'll ask one more thing. Again, Corey, I know you have a lot of callers, so I'll just say one more thing. Coach, I'll say this, that, again, not saying it's to brag, I'm just saying, factually speaking, the success that the teams have had on moving the ball against Ohio State, especially when the game was still in doubt, first half, actually happened to be from longer passes down the field. Arkansas State and Toledo have had the most success this year. And then the one decent drive that Michigan State had in the first half was through far, not just dump offs, but, going at 10 to 15 downs in the field. I was concerned, all Ohio State fans are concerned that they've had a lot of injuries in the secondary, that the weaknesses here might be the downfield passing, secondary. I didn't see Iowa try to throw it down the field. They just going to go throwing short passes. And
they don't against Yakov. They don't against anyone. Iowa doesn't take shots down the field against anyone. The only team they've done that against consistently was Nevada, one of the worst defenses in the country. I'm sorry, they're not. And you can say, well, they can't protect the quarterback. That's, you and I both know, Don, that there are times, even with an offensive line playing like this offensive line is playing, there are still times where you can take shots. Iowa's not doing it. They're not calling shots. They're not being aggressive. Can we agree on that, Don?
Well, we talked about waste downs and using waste downs. Let's face it, if it's 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1, everybody on defense is thinking run. Obviously, they're not in pass rush mode, so a play action pass should give you a lot of time, right? And that's what you need, is to get the receivers downfield. It takes time to do that. We're not very good at pass protecting, so we're hesitant to even make an attempt downfield. That's all true, but being able to pick and choose your spots does give you a chance. Let's not forget, too, we talked about, you're familiar with the term chipping. A back maybe helping out on an outside rusher. The tackle knows that back is going to chip on the rusher, so I don't have to worry about him just flying up the field, because the back is going to give himself up, at least temporarily, to blunt that guy's rush. That's one way to help. The other way to help, of course, is keep a tight end in. Because let's face it, if you're talking about some kind of dot play down the field, a simple example that comes to mind, a play action post. Typically, most people, if they have a play action post from one side of the formation, from the other side, they'll have an in route or a dig running in front of that free safety. Let's imagine there's a deep free safety play in the middle third. We're going to try to beat him over the top. If he defends the deep route, we're going to throw the ball in front of him. And of course, on top of those linebackers, and the linebackers, because of play action, they don't get great depth on their drops. So there's plenty of room to hit an in route in there at 16 yards or 18. 16 to 18 yards is a good depth for those in routes. And those plays, if you hit a receiver in stride, those can turn into touchdowns also, as you know.
Yeah, I'll say the last thing here. I actually, believe it or not, and some Ohio State fans said they were actually slightly, not that they won the game, but they actually were. Some of us were actually slightly disappointed about the turnovers that weren't the result of any great Ohio State defensive action, because we have a lot of tough, especially next week at Penn State, Michigan. I'm actually slightly disappointed about the Iowa for most of the time. Probably, again, I'm not saying that they're right. I'm just saying, everyone else did it too. So, but I'm just slightly disappointed that the defense, Ohio State defense, didn't get a proper look at things, a proper chance to prevent drives, make a lot of 3 and outs, perhaps even defensive downfield passes, because they got too many slightly unearned turnovers.
I do have a question for you, Yakov. Where does Ohio State play Penn State?
It's at big noon. They're playing at noon next week. Thank God we avoided the whiteout.
But where? Ohio State?
Where? It's in State College, Pennsylvania.
Okay, well, as you know, that's a good home field advantage. That'll be a real challenge.
Yeah. gonna look to pass it downfield. So I'd like to have got a couple warm ups. This last week, didn't get to do that. Got a couple, a couple gimmies. Again, when it was happening, I wasn't saying, "Oh no, don't throw an interception, don't fumble." But looking back at it after the game was over, I wish Iowa would have. If we're going to stop them, I'd rather it was from defense, not from as last time. We'll say it here is
So one of your few disappointments yesterday is we didn't do a good job of testing your DBs, right? We didn't put them to the test.
They have a lot of young guys in there. You probably should have done that. They were highly ranked. They had a lot of 4-star DBs, but they were some registered freshmen, guys who hardly even played last year.
Sure.
They should have some tests. I wanted to see them throw the ball down the field and test them, but
now,
got away with it this time.
I wish you'd have called Corey on Wednesday night and mentioned that to him. Maybe we could have gotten that to the coaches by the game time.
I'd like to think that the coaches looked at the film and hopefully they knew that, but they must not have tried it anyway.
I would like to think so. Yakov, I appreciate the phone call, sir, as always.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to stay here and keep listening, and it's a great show.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving along, and we're going to get to everybody's phone calls here who's waiting in the chat. We get to James H., who's been waiting on hold. James, welcome to the show. Appreciate you calling back. I know you had to get going last night, and you waited on hold for a while, so appreciate you calling in.
How are you tonight, Corey?
Doing okay. Doing all right. How are you?
Not too bad. One thing I just want to say is I think the score of 54-10 is really and truly deceiving considering how many times our defense stopped Ohio State in the red zone and forced them to a field goal.
Very true.
Absolutely.
And that being said, everybody's like, oh, well, from what I've been seeing anyway, everybody's been trying to downplay how bad our defense actually is. Well, in my opinion, any defense that's out on the field, as long as they are, they're not going to be able to continue to play at a high state level of play because they're going to eventually get gassed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And bringing up something that Don touched on is sitting back thinking about it is I think a lot of what our issues is on offense is not really just only play calling, but I think sitting back thinking about it, there's really and truly just a lack of following through with fundamentals.
And that's a concern, and that goes back to coaching, James.
If they're not following through with the fundamentals, you could have the best play caller in the world, but if they're not doing the small things, what good is having the best play caller going to do?
True, but you're hopeful that play caller is also teaching the fundamentals better behind the scenes.
Well, yeah. I mean that's a given, But if the players aren't following through and having good fundamentals, But I just want to say, I definitely think we need to have a change at offensive coordinator. But I think the issues that we are having runs far more deeper than just the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, you're by far not the only person. You might be in the majority in thinking that.
And then the other thing I wanted to touch on is I wanted to say hats off to Ohio State. They played a heck of a game, and they had a heck of a game plan, 6 turnovers. When was the last time you've seen an Iowa offense have that many turnovers in one game? Number 2, 54 points. That's the most points in the Kirk Ferentz team. And then I do got a question for Don here.
Okay.
Why is it that we just now 7 games in, or 7.5 games, 6.5 games in, just now seeing Padilla? To me, I feel like some of these other games we definitely should have seen him.
Right. We discussed it before. Obviously, the coaches feel that Petrus gives them the best chance to win the game. That's the reason they would give for you not seeing Padilla. But my counter would be when we had the game won against Nevada, it actually made sense to put in the backup quarterback, if only to protect the starter. And we didn't do it then either. But
and then the other thing to that, like, yeah, Padilla played last year, but this was his first snaps of the season, like there's going to be a little bit of rust, even if you are taking snaps on the sideline or in practice, like if you go that long without, game experience, you're going to be rusty for some of the stuff,
Yeah.
Not taken away from the fact that, fumbled snap didn't hurt or help, interception, didn't help. But, I personally, I was excited when I seen Padilla come out, I thought, okay, well, I felt like we might see some of the same stuff, but, I felt like we had a better shot out there with Padilla personally.
Right. I think a lot of the listeners probably felt that same way.
I agree.
Let me comment, Corey, about one play because it involved Padilla. Talking about the interception, a lot of people might have said, it's a case of Laporta dropping the ball. They might simply blame Laporta for the play, but what they fail to understand, that defender that intercepted was a zone defender sitting outside of the route that he was running. So when Sam broke to the outside, he did the right thing. His job should be to settle in that voided area, right? Rather than run wildly out into the next defender. So he geared down a little bit, expecting the ball to be thrown into his body. But the throw would suggest, I don't think Alex thought it was man coverage, but it would suggest that it's man coverage. Obviously, you throw the ball differently for man versus zone. If you're throwing the ball versus man coverage, you put the ball out in front of the receiver to be sure that the guy chasing the man coverage chasing the receiver doesn't have a chance to undercut that route. So you make sure you don't throw it on the back shoulder. You put it out in front, much as the ball was thrown. The reason Sam couldn't quite control the ball, there was a zone defender sitting outside. He's the one that intercepted the tip pass. But obviously, Sam expected the ball to be thrown into his body because he was in the void between those two defenders. So I would place the blame on that interception for sure more on Padilla than on Sam.
Well, and on that note, to me, on that particular play, it looked like they weren't used to each other, right? They're not used to how it looked like Sam wasn't used to how Padilla was going to be throwing him the ball. And it didn't look to me like Padilla was used to how Sam's going to run his routes, And to me, it just seemed like a lack of reps between the two of them. That was the issue, not necessarily. Maybe you're right. Padilla did read the coverage wrong, but to me, it just looked like there was a lack of comfort between the two and knowing how the other person is.
I'm just telling you that's why the ball was a little bit wide, is Sam recognized zone coverage and he geared down in the void. He did exactly what he's supposed to do.
Well, yeah, and I'm not trying to take anything away from that. I'm saying, like, it's like if you get a new receiver, right? You got to work with him and get used to how they're going to run their routes, how they're going to read the defense and whatnot.
The route is predicated by the coverage.
Hold on a second, Don. James, I got to let you slide because I got tons of calls and we're running up to our mark already. I appreciate you calling in, sir.
Not a problem, Corey. Have a good one.
Thank you, sir. All right. Let's get to Kyle, who's next in our seeing black screen. But I think, Kyle, are you with us?
Yeah, I don't know why my video's not working.
You're good.
I feel slightly frustrated, but I want to be careful because you always do a really great job, Corey, of respecting everybody's opinions when they call in. You're actually really fantastic at it. That's why this is a really great show.
Appreciate that.
Sometimes the conversation around the offensive line does frustrate me, because it sometimes feels like it's presented as sort of the final problem or the primary one. And I want to be really clear. Our offensive line is not good. And if you can win up front on both sides of the ball, it's really, really important. And we've seen that for years as that's what the Hawkeyes have done well when they've won. And so I don't want to say that at all. But I feel like sometimes we've sort of been lulled into the coach speak, so to speak. People always use, well, if we would just execute a little better, if we just block a little bit better, then Spencer or Alex would have more time. And that's 100% true. But even Brian Ferentz said in his week 2 press conference with the media, if you're waiting for a perfect pocket every single time, then you're going to be waiting a long time. And the more games I watch outside of the Hawkeyes, the more I see quarterbacks and athletes and players who just make plays. And so again, I want to be really clear. I think the O-line struggles, but I really wonder, do we actually have the worst horses in the nation at offensive line? Is Colorado State or Hawaii or Nevada, are those teams worse offensive lines than us? Is there also a problem with what we're asking our offensive line to do? I have heard the coaches say that it takes a long time to learn our system as offensive lines, that it's technical and it's really predicated on every single guy doing their job really, really well. And if one guy does their job poorly, like the whole thing breaks down. And so it's just sort of language that communicates to me there's not a large margin for error. And since we struggle, I guess my sort of question is, am I crazy to think that we're asking them to do something that we can't do and that we should have changed that? And this sort of came to a head to me this weekend. I went and visited my brother, who's a baseball coach at a small private school, and he was telling me a story about their football program who started 0-3. And in the middle of that third game, at halftime, the coaches got together and they realized they'd had some injuries on the offensive line, and things just weren't going very well. And so what they decided to do in the middle is they decided to run a hurry-up offense, a 2-minute offense, and they had a lot of success in the second half. And so they moved on with that, and they said, this is what we're going to do for the rest of the year, because this is what's going to help us have a higher margin for error, not quite have so many mistakes, because our offensive line is not playing well. And sure enough, they won their next 3 games, and they actually just lost this weekend by 1. And I thought it was just really interesting, because my brother was asking the head coach, hey, so why did you make that change? And he said, well, we had some problems up front. We didn't have the elite talent that we thought we could. And he asked him a second question and said, is that how you want to play? And he goes, definitely not. I would rather play complementary football. I'd rather run the ball, control the clock, control the tempo of the game. And he said, well, then why did you do it? He goes, because we didn't have the guys to do it. And like, that would be coaching negligence. And so I don't know. I guess, Don, am I crazy for thinking that at some level, why, knowing that we had offensive line issues last year and knowing that we didn't address those in the offseason, why didn't we more think about, and this is where I don't know enough about how to mask certain problems, as not being a football mind. Am I crazy to think that like some of our issues could have been solved if we built around what we had instead of expecting these offensive linemen who for basically a year and a half have shown that they're not able to get the system that we want done? Am I crazy to think that that's a bigger problem than just execution?
I don't believe our system is our problem. One thing we can do that's worth commenting on, because the offensive line's gotten a lot of blame, and they deserve a certain amount of blame, no doubt about it. But there are a couple of things we can do to help them out. Corey, you're very familiar with the term of climbing in the pocket. You're familiar with that term. The bottom line, let's imagine we're in the gun and we take a snap at 5-yard depth and we back up to 9-yard depth, let's say, and you have to sense the pressure off the edge. If you're getting pressure off the edge, then it's kind of obvious what you need to do. You need to step up in the pocket, climb the pocket, as we say. And from there, of course, the edge rushers can no longer get to you, right? They were trying to make a play off the edge. Our tackles ran them up the field. They're out of the play now. You step up, and, of course, you have those inside rushers to deal with. But let's face it, there are only 2 of them, typically, a normal 4-man pass rush. So all you got to do is simply slide left, slide right, buy some time by extending the play. And if you don't feel comfortable with the choice downfield, at that point, of course, you can pull the ball down and call go. We used to call go. They probably don't call go anymore, but go simply told those offensive linemen, we're not throwing it. We're trying to gain yardage across the line of scrimmage. So that go call means you can now become a blocker. And it doesn't matter if you're downfield or not, because I'm hoping I'm downfield too as a quarterback. So that's one way we can help out, is doing a better job of having a little more of the edge pressure. And when we do have edge pressure, stepping up in the pocket. And I realize sometimes there aren't many good places to go up in the pocket either, but at least it's back from -3 rather than -8, right? That's 5 yards of field position. The other thing that gives us problems, one time they had a stunt and our tackle got beat inside, and this is on Spencer's fumble. Corey, you remember the play well. We had pressure. Understand this about description I'm going to give. If you look straight ahead from where the center snapped the ball, that's 12 o'clock, right? Just imagine a big clock laying on the ground, laying on the turf. If straight ahead is 12 o'clock, then over here, and I'm the quarterback, so over here at right angles to that 12 o'clock would be 3 o'clock, right?
Right.
So we talk about the edge pressure at 3, pressure at 9 on the other side. So what about a stunt that takes that edge rusher inside? What if he tries to beat the tackle inside? That becomes pressure at 2 or pressure at 130, whatever the description might be, inside pressure. Here's what people don't understand. If you get pressure at 2, you don't need to run away from the pressure. You need to escape at 3 or escape at 4. If you need to give a little ground to escape that edge rusher, then do it. But Spencer didn't do a good job of that. And sure enough, that edge pressure got to him, and that's how the ball came out. So a better awareness of that inside pressure, that's an indication you should escape to the outside of the field. And out there, of course, you have all kinds of time, typically. A lot of people wouldn't even assume then that Spencer was going to run. They would still stay in coverage. And in the meantime, of course, Spencer can at least press the line of scrimmage. And as he gets closer to the line of scrimmage, he'll make that decision of whether to run or throw. But in the meantime, of course, the ball is up, and he's a threat to throw, which means people are playing pass defense. And that gives him a better chance to run for yardage after the flush, after he leaves the pocket. Hope that makes sense.
It totally does. I'll admit there's a lot of stuff that you say there that I don't understand as a non-football guy, and yet at the same time, the thing that I can hear loud and clear is that you're talking about ways to work around some of the weaknesses we have. And I'll admit
we can provide more help to our offensive line than what we're doing.
For sure. I think that, I may have used the wrong terminology with scheme and whatnot. I know sometimes we don't know all the language and terminology, but I think that's kind of what I mean is as I saw this Concordia coach go, hey, I'm not changing my entire offense, but I am changing one thing that will help cover a weakness so we can have more success. And I think the thing that I hear in press conferences, and again, we're not getting the full story, but we are seeing the games every week, and I don't see not huge changes. That's unfair. I don't see things that communicate to me that they're willing, or at least I don't have the eyes to see like, hey, we're willing to do something that's going to cover up the weakness so that we can have a little bit more success now, so that then when they do develop, we can kind of go back to what we know works. So thanks for your time, Don.
Thanks, Cal. All right, we've got Murder Blaze the 4th coming up next. Ryan, Brian, and James, you're all in line. We're gonna go quick fire, Don. So I know
okay.
You're
short answers.
You're a technician, so we can be here for hours. We're gonna go quick fire on some of this.
25 words or less.
Yes. Will Jack Campbell go to the NFL? I'm assuming he means after this season. Just prediction, Don. I'm assuming he has one more year he could take.
If he's got I don't know what year he is in school right now.
He's got one more year with COVID, I believe. I think he's gone, for the record.
Yeah, I think he'll certainly play on Sunday, yes.
Ron says, do we finally have a body of work on Brian that shows that he is not up to the task? Where is Gary Barta on this? That would be a better question for Gary Barta, because it's all subjective, right? And Gary Barta is the one, theoretically, that has to make a decision on Brian.
You're right.
Kevin, this is a tough question, and I'm frustrated that we even have to answer this question. And some Iowa fans would say we're traitors to the program for even having this conversation. But Kevin says, do Iowa fans want Iowa to win games this season, make a bowl? Don, you have to understand, And I know you're going to say you never want to see your team lose. And obviously that's the case. However, there are some fans, Don, that want change. And they believe the only way change will occur is if you pile on the losses. Can you at least understand why some fans would feel this way?
I do understand that, yes.
Ryan says, did anyone else see that Reganey was wide open down the field on the pick six?
On the pick six, I can't remember where Reganey was lined up on that particular play.
Yeah,
no, I don't recall. I don't remember seeing him being wide open down the field. I don't remember that.
Right. And then finally, Clint says, can Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz really change things without any help, outside help or hires? Kirk Ferentz has been doing it one way for 24 years. It's all he knows, or more importantly, believes in. It just seems impossible. Don, do you think major changes can occur with an offense like this without some coaching changes? Major changes.
From one season to the next, yeah. Absolutely.
But I think
I'll give you a simple example. Out of season, any number of coaches might do it. They might bring in maybe a retired college coach or a retired NFL coach to ask him for his opinions, bring him in as a consultant and ask him to assist in them reworking the plan. That's the kind of thing that can be done in the months of January, February, March. That's the only logical time to get that done. In season is not practical.
But there is a difference, Don, in the question of, is it possible and will it happen? Those are two very different questions. So,
well, it's not going to happen until next winter. This winter, I should say.
If it happens at all, Don.
If it happens at all.
It didn't happen last winter.
Well, you've always heard me say drastic times call for drastic measures, and our times are getting more drastic. I'll say that.
Fast Outdoor Food says, serious question, did Spencer get a bump up in rating as far as recruiting ratings as he beat Jared Goff's records? It's hard for a backup to beat that. I know you don't read too much into star ratings and whatnot, but do you believe that when a guy breaks records, kind of high profile records like Jared Goff's out in California, that would have helped Spencer's perception? I mean, the fans or the coaches or recruiters are still looking at Spencer Petras on film, right?
Right. I don't know too many of the recruiting experts that are former coaches. There used to be a guy years ago. I don't know what his main job was. He was a postman. I forget his name, but he was supposedly a recruiting expert. Well, he was mostly a self-proclaimed recruiting expert, and there are a lot of them out there. But here's the truth: if I'm going to evaluate quarterbacks, any position really, I'll say it this way: I had a coach one time on our staff who will remain nameless. He made a bold comment one time. He said, "I can tell you if a guy can play by looking at 10 snaps." And I later told him, I pulled him aside, and it was a younger coach, and I said, "You shouldn't say that because that's not true." And he said, "Why is it not true, Coach?" I said, "Because they're not fatigued after 10 snaps. You need to look at games in which they're fatigued. A game typically in September when it's warm and a difficult playing environment. For that matter, a game in September against a really good opponent. Let's face it, highlight videos. I had a great highlight video when I was in high school too. That did not mean I was a great quarterback. So you need to look at game video of a very difficult game, ideally in tough conditions. That's when you find a lot about any particular prospect. And it's painstaking. But if I was going to pick a quarterback, I'd probably look at every game he ever played in his senior year for sure. The year I was evaluating, maybe it was evaluating junior video before his senior year. But I would look at all of them, especially those games that are the toughest opponents, because that's what you want to measure a guy against is a quality opponent. Who really cares how he looks against a bad football team? Because there aren't going to be any bad players out there on Saturday afternoon in the Big Ten.
Let's get to Murder Blaze, who's been on hold. How you doing, sir? Welcome to the show.
Doing good. Nice to talk to you guys again. Just real quick, the question that Coach Ferentz was given during the postgame press conference in regards to making the change at QB, How do y'all feel about his response to that, where he said it's the way he's been doing things for 24 years in response to making a change at offensive coordinator? It's like the way you've been doing things for 24 years, so he's not going to change up now because it's been working so far. In my line of work, I'm in the Marine Corps, and I've been in the Marine Corps for about 13 years now, and things have changed, so I've had to adapt to those changes over time. So things that worked when I was in, 4 years in, don't work, 13 years in now. So what do y'all have to say about that, I guess?
Well, I'll make a comment first, Don.
Okay.
I think Kirk Ferentz can back that comment up by his track record. And yeah, he doesn't, historically, he hasn't let coaches go during the season. But as I said earlier in the show, there also hasn't been a situation with one of his coordinators where it was this bad. Even the 2012 offense with Greg Davis wasn't this bad. I don't know, go back to 1999, but again, you're talking about a rebuilding year. Although Don, I shouldn't say rebuilding. That's a bit disrespectful to Coach Fry and yourself. The cupboard certainly was not left empty, but my point is, it was the first year of that staff, and you're getting your feet under him. We're talking about 24 years in right now, so he has set that precedent. However, they've never had a situation this bad, and it's also, we know it doesn't help the fact that we're talking about a situation with his son, and that's his opinion. But the bottom line is, the questioning was fair, and I applaud the Ohio State reporter who asked the question. I may ask you got an Ohio State hat on, so obviously you're an OSU fan. What's your first name, by the way? I want to call you by your first name.
Ages. We talked last week. Ages.
Oh, how do you remind me? How do you say that name again?
Aegis.
Aegis. Hey, how do you spell it?
Aegis.
That's
Aegis.
your real first name?
Yes.
Wow, that's really cool. No, I'm not trying to. That's a really cool first name. I'd never heard that before. I know we had this discussion last week. Aegis. What I would say to that is, did the reporter that works for Cleveland.com, right? Does he go after coaches often? I mean, I don't know the guy's reputation in the media.
I don't think he's particularly going after coaches per se. I think it's more so of him asking difficult questions. He typically does that. He's pretty critical about the players, the coaches, whatever he sees during the game. I'm pretty sure it was Doug Maurice, right? From Cleveland.com. So yeah, he's usually if he sees something bad, like Denzel Burke playing bad over the last couple of weeks, he's been what's going on with that?
Right. Don, what did you think? Have you listened to the entire press conference yet with Kirk?
I have not.
Okay. Don's going to take the easy way out.
Let me say this. Just thank you for your service.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate it.
But no, I had no problem with the questioning. And I'm not going to take a shot at anybody else, but I applaud the Ohio State reporter that went into the Iowa press conference with a bunch of Iowa media members around him and asked those questions. Because listen, some of those questions have been asked in a roundabout fashion, but that was a reporter who didn't fear about being banned from future press conferences. Is that a fair way to go about it? Because that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, I could agree with that. The other thing I had is essentially, when you're trying to get bowl eligible at this point, okay, the Northwestern game is probably a game that you're looking at hey, we can legitimately win this. What are you looking at after that as being a place to hang your hat on, as far as we can go out there and get that win?
Well, they should beat Nebraska. And Cole, I'm not disrespecting Nebraska, but they should. Iowa's defense should be able to. I know Nebraska's got some talented players. They got one of the best receivers in the country in Trey Palmer. I do like their quarterback, but he's been up and down. They're dealing with a coaching change. Iowa should beat them. They should. Not saying they will, but they should. If I recall, that game is in Iowa City this year, correct, Don?
Yes.
So they should beat them. Not saying they will, but they should.
All right. Well, I appreciate you for having me. Hopefully, y'all guys finish off the season with a little bit stronger than you have so far, and good luck to you the rest of the way.
Thanks, Aegis. Always appreciate your phone calls. Don Johnson asked the question, where can we see that OSU reporter questioning Kirk? I found it on YouTube. I don't know who posted it, but it is on YouTube. I think it was an OSU account that I watched it on. So if you want to find that, you can just search Kirk Ferentz over the last 24 hours. All right, let's get to Brian, who's on hold. I hope I didn't screw up the order there. Ryan and James are going to get to you next. Brian, thanks for waiting on hold for so long.
Hey, no problem. First of all, you guys are awesome. Just found you guys, so I'm enjoying it.
Appreciate it, Brian.
So one thing I wanted to draw a parallel really quickly is for Hawk fans that have been around a while. I'm thinking of like Todd Licklider and how when he had an offense where they walked the ball up the court, if you think back to then, we could not keep a player in Iowa City. Anybody of any quality was transferring out. And I'm thinking about Charlie Jones and moving forward next year. I don't know why Arlen Bruce would stay. He's only being used on that reverse. They can't seem to get the ball to him. So just keeping in mind a little bit style of play. But the other thing that I find frustrating is that a lot of the time when I look at Padilla, he just seems to throw a crisper ball to me. I think that just watching all season, when we've looked at Petrus, I don't know how many times he's thrown a ball 10 or 15 feet over an open tight end's head, on third down. But he's also throwing in front of and behind the receivers a lot. There have been a lot of catches made where they're really reaching, tipping balls up and having to make a great effort. They're not really hitting the guys on the numbers. So I was just interested to get your take on what you see, Coach, when it comes to Petrus, if you're seeing a guy that's a little bit off target and making it hard on his receivers.
Well, the thing that frustrates me more than anything maybe would be receiver selection that has room for improvement. I'll just say it that way. As a quarterback coach, you're hoping that your guy picks the receiver that deserves the ball the most based on situations. If it's first down, of course, it's kind of clear cut, which receiver gives us the best chance for success. And if the chances are equal on a 12-yard route versus a 5-yard route, obviously you should throw the 12-yard route. But then when you put down and distance into it, it's a little more complicated. Obviously, you have to eliminate some shorter routes that are open, maybe with the idea of throwing the ball on or near the first down yardage to get that critical down first down. So that's my frustration is receiver selection. It needs to be better than it is. And part of that is pre-snap. You've heard me talk about that before. I think prime example is the first snap of the game. Don't assume it's man coverage because it wasn't. It was zone. And the guy lined up over our inside receiver is the guy that ended up over the outside receiver, underneath the outside receiver, I should say. And the ball was thrown right to him. So clearly it was misread by Spencer. I think he thought he had man coverage. He thought it was one-on-one, but it was not. That defender out there on the outside receiver was playing a deep zone, and the guy lined up inside was the one responsible for the flat. That's the one that made an easy play. And then the linebacker is another example. I don't know what happened on that one. Maybe his arm got bumped. I certainly couldn't see it because I went back and looked at it very closely. It didn't appear to me that he got bumped. He got bumped a little bit after the ball was released, but not before.
One thing that I think, too, when you guys talk about Ferentz's track record, and forgive me if I mess these up, but we all sat through Kyle McCann at the beginning of Kirk Ferentz's career, and then Brad Banks came along next. And a lot of people were just so happy with Brad Banks, but I sat there thinking, well, why in the heck didn't he get a look the year before? And then Jake Christensen, if I remember correctly, we sat through that, and did Ricky Stanzi come after that, who Ricky, he would throw a pick every once in a while, but he was a winner. He could get the ball down the field. And then again with Jake Rudock, who consistently threw short of the sticks on third down. And CJ Beathard came out of that, who to me had a much better arm. So, I'm sitting here also like listening to them talk about track record. And I think about these guys who were sitting on the bench, and granted, maybe they didn't have it all put together then, but they seem to have had, much better arms and decision making, and just maybe a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more confidence. So.
Yeah, you've heard me say one of the things I liked about Alex last year is that he didn't appear to be afraid to play the game. And that may sound silly, but you can't be risk averse to the point that you're afraid to play. There were times when I was frustrated to see on 3rd and long, we're throwing a very short route that has really little or no chance to make a first down, rather than giving a deeper route an opportunity to come open and make a difficult throw. It's a critical down after all. Incidentally, we're one of the worst teams in college football right now on critical down conversion. And that's certainly not all on Spencer. The responsibility for that number has to reflect on all offensive players. And for that matter, all offensive coaches. It all starts, of course, with being better on 1st and 2nd down. So you have a higher percentage of 3rd and short than you do 3rd and long.
I want to leave with just one quick question for you guys. If you can quantify and put into percentage, what do you think the percentage chance is that Brian Ferentz is back as offensive coordinator next year? And thank you guys very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Brian. I don't know if you want to take a stab at that, Don. I will. I think 75% no. I don't think he can. I just have to think that there will be some way where he moves on. I'm not predicting that Kirk fires him. I don't know how. And maybe it's just because this is my opinion that this needs to happen. And Don, for anybody who's new to the show, you are good friends with Kirk Ferentz. There's no secret to that. You used to be jogging buddies with Kirk Ferentz. You work on the same staff.
We've been friends for, Kirk's first year here was 81. We've been friends for 41 years.
So, no, again, for anybody who it feels like you're evading a question. That's not what you're doing. And I respect the fact that you value your friendship with Kirk Ferentz. I think it's a fair question, and you're welcome to answer it if you feel comfortable to, Don. Do you believe at this point, as of right now, do you believe that Brian Ferentz will be back as the OC in 2023?
I think it could go either way. And I say that just because we have 5 games remaining, and we simply don't know what's going to happen in those 5 games. Let's face it, the toughest assignments on our schedule have already come and gone. That would be Michigan and Ohio State. Maybe you want to add Illinois to that because they certainly are a top-notch team too. It looks like right now they're best positioned to win the West. Although, again, there's too many games left to know that to be certain. We're capable of winning all 5 of them. On the other hand, obviously, we're capable of losing several. I don't think we can lose all 5 of them. I don't see that happening. I think I'd be shocked if we don't find a way to beat Northwestern. I'd be shocked if we don't beat Nebraska as well. The other 3 games are more challenging because all 3 of them, I take that back. Wisconsin's here at home. But, of course, you saw Wisconsin do things yesterday that I didn't think they could do. I didn't think they'd beat Purdue, but they did. But we know that Purdue's going to be tough because I've publicly stated I think Jeff Brom's the best game planner of anybody in the league. And incidentally, yesterday, Charlie Jones had another 100-yard day. So they lost the game, but it was more tied to turnovers, I think. I believe they threw 3 picks. Wisconsin, I give Wisconsin credit for being tough in Camp Randall. And they knocked off Purdue, but I know we're going to have a hard time knocking them off because they're a good football team, and it won't be easy to beat them because they have quality players just like we do. So I think we simply don't know for sure what's going to happen. I think it could go either way. I do not think that Brian will be asked to leave. I think if anything, if Brian's not here coaching next year, it'll be because he chooses not to stay. He chooses to go. I think that's the most likely outcome.
I don't want to press you further on this, Don, and I'm not asking you what you would do in this situation, but if you were to predict forward, if the offense continues, because we're over halfway through the season, they're 331st in total offense. If they end up, 131st in total offense, if they end up at 131 at the end of the year, I know total offense isn't the only indicator, but if they basically continue, with marginal improvement throughout the rest of the season, assuming that occurs, do you think Brian will be back next year as OC?
Well, if we have, let's say we find a way to get to 7-5, that's entirely possible, right? We got to win.
With the offense, you think it's 7-5 is possible with the offense as it is right now?
Well, if we play like we did defensively against Ohio State, I think there's a chance. Let's face it, we still have. I said a chance, Corey. That's all I said was a chance. It's kind of far-fetched. Well, let's just think of it this way. If we can score a touchdown in the kicking game on a weekly basis and score a touchdown on defense on a weekly basis, of course we can win all 5 of them. Because that's getting significant help.
You're a statistics guy, Don. Is that going to happen? Even regardless how good the defense is, are they going to continue to be? I mean, Phil breaks the mold of probabilities, but
you were hoping to hear this comment, Corey. The odds of that are slim and none, and yes, slim as left town.
So
that's a Coach Fry expression for those that wondered.
Absolutely, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Don, but I appreciate your comment. Kevin, thank you for the super sticker, Kevin. As always, appreciate you being a loyal listener here, even though you're frustrated, I know. And I here's what I want to say. There's a few people in the chat, before we get to Ryan and James, a few people in the chat who have, I don't know if it's because people are upset about the game, but they've become very critical of this show. And we've had people who have been complimentary. How about Ian says that I need to change the channel name to The Hawkeye of the Storm. He says the from is not helpful. The phrase is the eye of the storm. The from honestly makes it confusing. I know I was confused at first. Ian, I appreciate your feedback. That is the name, and I'm not changing it. I appreciate your feedback. I do. That is the name, and we've had it. And then Ian also said later I need to fix my ring light. So Ian, in a very critical mood, which is okay. I appreciate Ian being here. Also, Fast Outdoor Food says I need a new song to open up the show that doesn't sound like you're on hold. Let me see if there's any other critiquing of the show. There was one more comment that I got to get to, Don, regarding regarding me actually personally. I believe. Let me find this. You're going to like it, Don.
Well, thank God none of these are directed at me.
Richard says, using the logic of many who have said Kirk, Brian, Barta, about Kirk, Brian, and Barta, you, Corey, should be fired because you have had off-season and 7 games to fix your phone problems, and the problems continue. I don't agree. Okay. I don't know what's going on with the phone line. It's the issue here is once I'm on the air, I really can't do anything about it. So that's if I'm not going to try to explain the technical issue that occurred. Because I don't really know the root problem of the tech issue. And the issue is when you're live on the air, that's when it crops up, and I literally can't do anything about it once we're live on the air. That's the unfortunate thing. And tweaked it, and we've gotten the phone line back for our next show, and then it goes. So appreciate, and I think there's some jesting there from Richard.
Richard risks being in the doghouse with Corey.
That's right. Mark says there are times the offensive line is letting rushers come free without engaging them. What could you say to Iowa's O-line to help them make corrections to stop these easy tackles for loss, sacks, and QB hits, Don?
One of the things, Mark, you might be talking about, there's a thing called a quick convoy. That's what we used to call it. And the linemen are actually supposed to let their guy through. The thought being we're going to throw the ball behind the line, so we're going to release our linemen down the field to block downfield, even while the ball's caught behind the line. So if you saw our guys, I don't think we're just automatically letting guys go. We're trying to slow them up, trying to stay engaged with them, but it's hard to maintain that contact, of course, because on defense are super athletes. It's not easy to be able to block them until the ball's thrown. So if you see our guys letting a guy go free, it's probably because we're running some kind of quick screen where the ball's thrown behind the line, and we're getting our linemen downfield so that they can get in position to block someone other than the guys lined up on the ball that are rushing.
And then let me just find this here. Jordan brings up the offensive line as well. They've had some good recruiting along that offensive line, Jordan, and a lot of these guys haven't panned out. If you missed my video on some of Iowa's recent offensive line recruiting, Don, you watched that video. What were your thoughts? I mean, I know I'm not breaking any information, but when you kind of sum it all up in the last 4 to 5 classes, is that concerning to you, the attrition they've had for various reasons along that offensive line?
Yes, it is. I will admit there were more players that had left the program than what I realized. You did an in-depth study of it, and some of the guys I didn't know much about at all. Some of them I knew quite a bit about them, but I was surprised there were that many that had been in the program and were no longer part of our squad. So that's a concern. Obviously, retention is always a concern. You understand as a position coach, your job is to pick the right players to recruit, and once they're here, your job is to help them to develop a tremendous loyalty for the program, so that they don't even really think about going somewhere else. Nowadays, with the transfer portal, of course, it's on everybody's mind that you don't have to stay put, and that's a little bit of a problem for programs everywhere. But obviously, for whatever reason, guys are no longer in the program, and that's why we're ended up playing with some younger players that simply don't have as much experience as what we would typically have in our offensive.
And Don, RPM 1234 says I should demote myself.
If you demote yourself, who's going to run the program? Who's going to run the show?
Somebody said you can host.
No, I'm not capable of that. All I know is a little bit about football.
All right. Terry, coming to my defense. How about Terry? Thank you, Terry.
Terry's the man.
I think this is Dez from our Michigan show. I came a bit late, but did Coach say we passed the test of Ohio State? I don't think those words ever came out of your mouth. Did they, Don?
That we passed the test, meaning Ohio State passed the test? I'm confused.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't think you ever said that, Don.
I think it was a learning experience for Ohio State. The reason I say that, they realized, you know what, we better get better versus man-free tight because we had difficulty getting off those press corners.
Right.
So it was a wake-up call for them, I think. Is it possible that Michigan might try to do the same thing? Not down after down, but specifically in short yardage situations or in goal line situations. And if that's the case, you better have some man beaters that are available to you. Or as we talked about before, Corey, you better be able to maneuver your alignment so that you get the matchup you're looking for by jumping formations or using motion, that type of thing. So I think Ohio State, the way they responded in the second half was impressive. They put up 28 points against us. I'll admit mostly with the passing game, but let's face it, they tend to pass sometimes to set up the run, I think. I'll put it this way. They have a very, very potent passing game. So I'd be upset if I were an Ohio State fan and they weren't throwing the ball 30 times a game. That's how many times they threw it. Incidentally, I think we got to them once. One thing that did change in the second half, Corey, which I think helped them to be more and more effective with their passing game, is we started running into more and more difficulty putting pressure on the quarterback. I think our pass rush got a little bit fatigued. I think we only ended up with one sack, I believe. Does that sound right? I know they had more sacks than we did. I think they had 5 maybe versus our 1.
So you're talking about the Joe Evans sack. It was the only sack?
That could be. I can't remember another one offhand. I could be wrong about those numbers. I'm not sure. The one thing I'm sure of is they had more sacks than we did. They sacked us more often than we sacked them.
All right, we got more callers, more people in the chat. Don, we are at 2 hours now. Are you okay to go a little longer?
I'm fine.
Okay, we're going to try to keep these calls short, folks, so I apologize, but again, we got to keep going here. We'll be here all night. Let's add Ryan to the mix now. Ryan, thanks for calling.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking my call. Coach Patterson, thanks for taking your time. First, quick comment. I hope Ohio State wins the national championship as a Big Ten guy. Fantastic football team. Now, regarding Iowa, let's just assume we win against Northwestern. That'd be win number 4. Then you got at Purdue, Wisconsin at home, and at Minnesota before Nebraska. You got to win 2 more of those 4 to bowl. Now, Coach, what are your thoughts about our strategy for quarterback going forward? I don't think Padilla has really real sample size that we can really draw from, at least this year. He was hit or miss a little bit last year, but he played pretty well at times as well. I guess where I'm kind of going is I would like to see a real true quarterback competition come spring. So my thought was, if, say, there's a blowout, obviously the coaches are going to prioritize getting to a minimum of 6 wins. But if there's a blowout, what's the harm? No, start Padilla, I would assume, the rest of the way through, but getting Labus or even Carson May in for some reps, and then whichever one of Carson May or Labus can compete with Padilla, assuming he comes back. There have been some rumors out there that he might be moving on after this year, maybe even done with football, not sure. But let's just assume he might be back next year. He would be probably the odds-on favorite. But I think, Coach, you said a while back you had a quarterback at Western that was Big Ten material. And maybe we recruit a Big Ten, or excuse me, an FCS quarterback in the portal to compete with Padilla and Labus or May in a true best player wins the job competition going to next year. I'm not sure if that'll happen, but I thought that'd be one good strategy. My one concern a little bit is the chicken or the egg. So, to use a Kirk Ferentz term, we're not sexy. I think he kind of almost takes pride in that. But yet, we're in an era now where players can come and go pretty much as they please, as the climate has changed very much. And I'm not so sure that approach is I think you have to get a little sexier on offense. In other words, show a willingness to take some risks and throw downfield. Players aren't going to want to take 5-yard out routes as their only chance to touch the ball. There are some talented players still on this team that I feel you could go long. I mean, remember that Arlen Bruce touchdown catch kind of over the shoulder? That was a beautiful play. We have done some of that in the past, and there's always a chance that you can get a pass interference in 15 yards and a first down. And yet we don't do any, we dink and dunk. And I don't know a lot of – I would think a quarterback is not real interested in only dinking and dunking, and certain wide receivers want to play in a more dynamic offense, and that is my concern, what our offense might look like come December, if I could get your thoughts on that. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate the call.
Those are accurate observations. Corey, you've heard me say this before. It wouldn't bother me at all. I'm very curious of how Joey Labus looks right now. And I realize he's the scout team quarterback, I guess. I don't know for sure who's maybe it's strictly May on the scout team. Maybe it's Labus also. Obviously, Labus doesn't get many reps with the varsity right now. But you've heard me say before, Corey, it wouldn't bother me at all if we simply had a 5-play package for Labus, even starting this next weekend. Let's just come up with 5 plays that we know for sure he can run. Let's talk about those 5 plays, and let's put him on the field and see what he does with them. I think that's good football. And if he has 5, then maybe Padilla is the starter. That's fine. The other 2 should be able to run any and all plays we have on our call sheet. But obviously, Labus is not prepared to run the entire offense. But let's just pick out 5 plays. The opponent doesn't know what they are. And he can go on the field with confidence that it's going to be one of those 5 plays.
And this doesn't mean this is not a new idea. You've been saying this far, but it's not like you watch Padilla and say, well, he's not the answer. Let's move on. No, you've been saying this for a long time. And I've been saying the same thing. We look at what Purdue did to Iowa last year. They used 3 quarterbacks in one game by design, and that was with Aiden O'Connell as your QB1.
That's right. And you heard me say there's no doubt in my mind those second and third team quarterbacks knew what the plays were. They're only going to run a handful of plays. That was all that the coaches had to pick from. So they were well prepared to go on the field in front of 70,000 and execute those plays. Joey Labus can do that same thing. Maybe it's only 5 plays. That's okay. That doesn't mean that he's only out there for 5 snaps. Maybe we run those 5 plays and then we run some of them twice. That's okay, because the other team doesn't know. For all they know, there's 10 plays.
And for the record, Iowa could learn a lot. I know there may be some bad blood between the two. I know there was some recruiting rumors out there that Iowa does not particularly feel too soft and fuzzy with warm and fuzzy about Jeff Brom and that staff over there. But take yourself a piece of humble pie and learn something from what Purdue's doing offensively, because Jeff Brom is one of the best offensive minds in the country.
Yes.
And perfect example of that, Don. So, all right, we've got James waiting. James, your device is not connected. While you get that figured out, I'm going to hit a couple of questions here. Again, rapid fire, Don. Let's try to keep these stopped and quick. Bill Smith says, should Iowa consider punting when they get possession so they have a better chance of scoring? I think that's a sarcastic question. We'll move on. Casey says,
Bill.
Question for you. If you were our head coach, would Padilla start this week?
Yes.
Wow. And you've looked at the film. Now, you haven't probably looked at it more than once, but you would venture to say that he should start this week.
Well, what we've been doing hadn't worked very well, so I think it's okay to make a change.
All right. And just so people are aware, if you left to chat a long time ago, I try to save those and go back, so don't feel like I'm ignoring you. Clint says, how much of a jump can this O-line make in a season? To me, they look like the 1999 O-line, and it took them 3 years to be really good. Not saying they need to be the 2002 line, but how good can you improve? How much can you improve during the season? I don't think you can, and probably not enough realistically, Don.
No. The goal is to improve, but obviously from one game to the next, there's a limited amount of improvement you can make. These same guys we're asking to improve, they've been out there playing now for 7 games in most cases, right? The same group of players, and they've made improvement, but it's not easy to make market improvement from 1 week to the next, because the other team always has this annoying habit of trying to mess up our plays. So they can get better, but there's a limit to how much they can improve from 1 week to the next.
Swigword, I think we answered his question. Is Petras going to start this week? Well, is he going to start this weekend? We don't know that, Don, right? I mean, we will see, and I don't even know if the depth chart really tells the story, but it will be interesting to see the depth chart come tomorrow. That will be kind of interesting news at noon Central Time, or whenever they release that. Mark says, appreciate this from Mark. Great show again. Coach Patterson adds so much. Look forward to your show on Saturday and Sunday. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. See Hawkeyes says, I'm so happy I found your channel and show a while back, and I'm glad to see it growing. Thank you, Coach and Corey. You're helping us stay sane through all of this. Erica adds, I'd love to hear Coach's take about Torrey's attempt at being creative.
Ill-advised. Of course, he wasn't advised to do it. But you know what's so frustrating? Think about this. Think about our guys that were on the line as just blockers, and now they're releasing down the field to cover the punt. And now they realize, but way too late, they realize there is no punt. In the meantime, of course, some of the blockers recognized that the ball still hadn't been punted. At that point, of course, they left their men and were able to get in position to tackle Torrey for a gain of 4. He needed 6. So it's just the truth of it is, imagine if we called a fake and executed it the same way, except the blockers knew they were going to start off showing as if it's a punt and then become blockers. We could have blocked them all and would have easily made the first down, but it wasn't a call fake. It was simply he chose to do on his own, and it was ill-advised, and obviously it gave him great field position all over again.
All right. Jim Knapp says our offense is very predictable. Would you endorse running the Wildcat on occasion? Don, I'm an advocate for it. If it's got a guy who can, we've used it before. It's not a new concept. I'm an advocate for it if you have a guy who can throw out of the Wildcat. And I know I lost at least one viewer back in week 3, and frankly, I don't really care. You know, if you disagree with my opinion, you think it's ridiculous and you want to leave, see ya. I mean, I love everybody being here, but I thought it was an idea that we both felt like it was an idea that should be explored. Cooper DeJean, I understand the kid's playing great on defense. They're using him in a lot of different facets of the game, but he is a former quarterback. And we're not asking, just like you talk about Labus coming in for 4 or 5 plays, what would be the harm in having 4 or 5 plays out of the Wildcat ready. You might not even use it week to week, but you have it ready. And here's a guy who can throw because he did so at the high school level. Don, you're a former OC. Is that a dumb idea? Let's revisit it for a moment.
No, it's not. I was even going to suggest to you, it doesn't have to be 4 or 5 plays. It could be 3. 3 plays. Let's practice these 3 plays. Let's practice them today and tomorrow and the next day. And it's not like Cooper DeJean's never run those kind of plays anyway. I'm sure he was a running quarterback for how well he runs. And maybe 2 of them are running plays. Maybe one's some kind of zone read. One is some kind of perimeter read, such as, you know what a fly sweep is, Corey. You can read a fly sweep also. And if the end runs up the field and takes away the fly man, then you keep the ball. And now you have a gap scheme inside with the quarterback running the ball. So maybe it's an option play for both zone read and for a fly sweep read. And then the third possibility, of course, would be some kind of play action pass. That's really all you need. You practice those 3 plays. My God, that's why you practice, is to be able to get good at what you might do in a game. And it would be very easy for those 3 plays to be learned by the best guy to play Wildcat. And that would be somebody that can run and throw. For all I know, maybe Joey Labus needs to be the Wildcat guy. That's okay.
And if I recall, somebody accused you of just saying that to placate me, Don. Are you just saying that to placate me? Am I fragile?
No, I'm not. I'm not trying to be a nice guy here.
Okay.
Just speaking the truth. That's all.
Kaburu Kadnu, Coach, Long's Drugs have ponchos, umbrellas, and hairnets. Right now, Iowa colors with Iowa basketball on the shells.
I don't get it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to. I'm glad you don't get it, because Don, if you did understand, I'd have to get you evaluated, because this is I don't know if there's a language barrier here, but man, if it's Google translator, Google is not working. So to our user, this did not come out the way you wanted. So I apologize. I wanted to be able to get to your question. Kevin says, Corey, maybe think about not doing live calls, asking people to send your questions in advance. Send your questions in advance. Let me tell you, Kevin, why, and I appreciate the suggestion. Let me tell you why, even though we end up doing these longer shows and I have to cut callers off at times, and I'm going to continue to have to do that. Nothing personal, but as the show grows, we get more people on here. Certainly it would help if you are able to do that in advance without me prodding it. But here's the reason I want to go to a mailbag style situation where people send in their questions ahead of time, Kevin. That's already being done. And I think what makes this show great, Don, you are primarily what makes this show great, but the ability to interact live with our callers, I think, is a special, special thing, and it's unique to this show. So I appreciate the suggestion, Kevin, but Don, I think you enjoy it as well, this format we have.
Absolutely. Let me say one other thing, Corey. I'm always disappointed when the caller does not show up on the screen, because I like to look at the people I'm talking to. So for all those callers that wonder about providing a photo of yourself, a video of yourself, if you can arrange for that to be done, we'd prefer it that way, because I like to look at the people we're talking to.
Mike 3883, didn't mean to ignore your question. I think we covered that. Don, you've watched the game here in the last 24 hours, and my thoughts really have not changed. There's times when you're emotional after a game, but I'd like to think yesterday, you're frustrated, but the logic, the fact of the matter is that the Iowa defense is playing at a level that's should be. I mean, Phil Parker deserves a lot of money, Don, and I know he's making over $1 million, but boy, that guy, for him to be able to do it in spite of the offense, I think is just unbelievable. Yakov 22, does Gary Barta have a football background, player or coach? He is a former football player, correct, Don? You know what position he played?
I do not.
But yes, I think he does have a football background. Linda, if fans want to change, they need to stay home, leave their seats empty at the game. Loss of revenue gets attention. It's all about money. Tackle says, question for Coach, where does a team go from here? A demoralizing loss where your head coach finally decides to change QBs. It results in little difference. How does a team pick up the pieces after this? Don, I think we can agree that Independent Fanatic brings this up. Poor timing to bring in Padilla. Let's see what he can do against Northwestern. Petrus has had plenty of opportunities against the likes of South Dakota State, Nevada, and Rutgers to figure things out. Let's give Padilla an opportunity, and then we'll judge the situation. Is that fair?
Yeah. I was okay with the timing on it all. You know, the pick six was right before the half, only, 2 minutes left in the first half, I think, something like that. So there weren't any opportunities really to put Padilla in at the end of the half, I don't think, as I recall. And I was certainly okay with him starting the second half. It didn't surprise me that he did, because let's face it, Spencer had a rough first half, and it made sense that somebody else might be given that same opportunity.
Appreciate the super chat from Vital Transformation. I'm not going to, everybody can see the comment. I appreciate the comment from Vital Transformation. I don't want to give the illusion that I'm ripping anybody in the media. But I do appreciate the super chat and that from Vital Transformation for you being here. Berger says, Coach, some of us have a face for radio. That's why he's not going on camera. Fair enough. We won't challenge you in that.
We want to hear from you, Berger, anyway.
Richard says, when you post times that you have of your various shows, would you state whether it's Central or Eastern time? I live in Michigan. Some of your start times are Central and some are Eastern. Okay. I will try to, I, of course, post to Twitter, post to Facebook. Try to do that regularly, Richard, but follow me on either platform, and we'll definitely try to include that. I try to include that, but I'll make a concerted effort to do that. All Hail Michigan says, if Iowa had a competent, average at best offense to help your stellar defense, I think Iowa would be a top 10, maybe top 8 team easily. I'm not an Iowa fan, but I'm a Wolverine fan. I enjoy your content, Corey. I'm just amazed at the Michigan fans who are in this show. I don't know why the Michigan fans flock to this channel, but I do appreciate them. I mean, I know some of them have gotten into some fights in the chat, but there are some that, like yourself, that are very complimentary. So I do appreciate the support. And Swigward says, please hit that like button. Yes, if you're here right now, we've got 352 people still on, and about 300 people on From the Hawkeye the Storm channel, a little over 50 on the Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football channel. Please, please, please hit that like button. It does help. Clint says, neither quarterback goes through their progressions very well. Why not go max protect, throw the football more down the field? Petrus is more accurate downfield. What do we have to lose, Don? I think we've answered that question. I think that needs to be implemented. Is that accurate?
I think Clint and I are cut out of the same cloth. I think we're in agreement.
And I appreciate this as well. Swigward's an Ohio State fan, but he's here for the content, so thank you. Stacy, any chance that Kirk will take Coach Patterson's advice on Labus, giving him a small read option package?
I'm not going to bring it up to Coach Ferentz. All I do is discuss analytics. That's all I do. I'm not giving coaching advice. If he wants to ask for my advice, I'll give it to him.
That's fair. Coach Frost. Ryan Frost says, no relation to Scott, I'm assuming. Our QB coach is a former O-lineman. Doesn't that seem really weird? Yeah. I said that back when they promoted him, Ryan. Any other successful Power 5 programs have former O-line coaches coaching their quarterbacks? I don't know the answer to that question, Don, but very few, if any, right?
Right. I've stated before, most position coaches are coaching the same position they played. That's true. Most of them are, but there are exceptions, and I mentioned Kirk as a great exception. Kirk learned offensive line play from Joe Moore, his old high school coach. He was one of the best that ever coached, and that's what gave Kirk an opportunity to become a great offensive line coach. I do believe Andy Reid. I can't imagine Andy Reid's a play caller, right? I think he doesn't actually call the plays. I think he certainly calls some of them, and he looks like he might be a former old lineman, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. I better look that up.
There are always exceptions to the rule, but just because there's exceptions to the rule doesn't mean that's what's right, what's smart,
yeah. What's logical. The rule still states otherwise.
Exactly. That's why. Yeah. You, Corey, did you read the article written by the OSU reporter at Cleveland.com? Yes, I did, and I talked about that earlier. Hawk Knott says, "Do you ever notice that Brian's play call sheet is way smaller than any other team's play call sheets?" Don,
I have noticed that. Maybe it's really fine print.
Jeremy Steffen, question for Coach P. First play sprint out left. They had 2 receivers running out routes at about 12 yards. What's the goal there? Seems to cause congestion and tighter windows. Same on the Padilla interception.
Yeah. Well, I don't think on the first interception, the inside receiver, I think, hung more in the seam, I think. Only reason I say that, the defender lined up over him is the one that expanded to the outside of the field and the one that got in the throwing lane. So that inside receiver was somewhere back inside of that flat defender. I know that for sure. I'm not sure you can see that inside receiver the whole way. But the bottom line, of course, is that you do need to put a lot of thought into the separation of one receiver from another. The whole idea in general versus zone defense is horizontal stretch versus vertical stretch. Some concepts, you want horizontal stretch to be able to isolate on a player that's between the two. And then obviously you look in one way and throw the other. That's the basic fundamental behind horizontal stretch. Vertical stretch, of course, would be the example I gave earlier, play action post. And then underneath that post route is an end route that's maybe at 18 yards. The post, of course, is at 35 yards. And if the defender defends the post, then you come on down to the dig. And if that's covered, then you come on down again. You know, it's a vertical stretch play. So that's the basic concept in attacking zone is either horizontal or vertical stretch.
Great stuff, Don. Appreciate this from Ernest. He says he's an Arkansas Razorbacks fan. I enjoy your platform more than any Razorbacks platform has to offer. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work. I'm amazed by that, and thank you, Ernest. I mean, I'm flattered by that, and again, that's credit to you, Don.
Well, thank you, Ernest. We appreciate people that have a great appreciation for football. They don't have to be Iowa fans, of course. If they just appreciate the game and maybe the finer points of the game, then we like to think that we have a lot in common.
Absolutely. Coach, who do you think would be a good hire for OC after Brian is removed? Let's not. I know that's an uncomfortable question to some extent, Don, but let me ask you: who would you say for any open job right now that runs a pro-style offense like Iowa? Who are the best names out there? Would you say Paul Chryst because he's a former QB's coach? Is Scott Frost even in the mix? I mean, obviously Urban Meyer is a guy who is going to be tantalizing for head coaching positions, but I don't know if Paul Chryst would come to Iowa to be an offensive coordinator.
I wouldn't think so. I think his buyout's what, 10 or 11 million, I think. He doesn't have to work anymore. I doubt that he will.
Randy Hedberg is a guy who I think would be a great passing game coordinator. He's proven that at the FCS level. I don't know if you elevate him to a Power 5 offensive coordinator position, but I don't know, maybe. I mean, he's
certainly qualified. He's certainly qualified to be a co-coordinator, and by that I simply mean, could he be in charge of the passing game? Absolutely, because he knows a lot about the passing game. He would say he doesn't know as much about the running game. He's the passing game coordinator right now at North Dakota State. Some people do it that way. Some people have one coach that coordinates the running game, another that coordinates the passing game. And then obviously somebody's got to decide, is it going to be run or pass on any given down? And one of those two co-coordinators, of course, has to be the play caller, the guy that's going to initiate the start of the next play.
Tyler says, do you believe the departure of Chris Doyle has anything to do with the O-line struggles? I do think it has something to do with it.
I can see why you think that way. As I understand it, Corey, Chris Doyle did spend a lot of time with the offensive line. He was almost like another offensive line coach to have on staff. Not to mention, of course, he worked with all the players in the weight room, and they would. I think a lot of players would say we didn't really like him, but we certainly appreciated the results he got because he was an expert on player development.
Hummus Hero, Buckeye fan, says he appreciates the channel. Thank you, Hummus Hero, for being here. And I recognize your username from Mark Rogers' channel. And, of course, I want to give a shout-out to Mark Rogers, as always. Check out his content at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. We're simulcasting to his Iowa channel here as well. Appreciate him helping to make this possible. And Mike says, well, we don't have any live chats at this hour on a Sunday. So thank you, Mike, for being here. How about Hey19 says, every time Don smiles, a kitten is born and an angel gets its wings.
I better keep smiling then.
Oh, love it. Erica, appreciate the super chat, Erica, and our premium subscriber. And she said earlier that one of the reasons she hasn't been coming back is because too many fights in the chat. Erica, we don't want to lose you. Please keep coming back. She says, clearly we live rent-free in some of Michigan fans' heads. I mean, what's the upside? Appreciate the super chat from Erica. James H., appreciate the super chat from him as well. It's nice to see other fans here, not just Hawkeye fans. I think it's great to see their perspective. Also, do we still have Deuce? No, Deuce is gone. Deuce is down as a backup at Kentucky. We'll see if he's compete. We'll see what he does next year after Levis leaves. I'll be interested to see if he can compete for the starting role there. James also says, what game left do you think we have the best chance of winning? I mean, that's a rhetorical question, Don. Isn't it the one in front of us?
I would say Northwestern.
I agree. Pugmaster with the super sticker. Thank you, Pugmaster. And he adds, keep up the amazing work, man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. John Buckeye, good show as always. And again, thank you as always, John, for the support. The sauce, if Iowa loses to Northwestern, is Kirk canned? No, he's not. The pressure will be stronger than ever, Don, but no, that's not going to happen if they lose to Northwestern. Lemansky with the super chat. Thank you, Lemansky. A lot to play for this year. Alex mobility gives more time to run our routes. Don, I do remember when you had Gales, Gordy Bohannon, Chuck, and even, how do you pronounce his last name, Don?
Lon Olenzak.
Olenzak could throw passes in 1980.
It's true. I don't think Lonnie threw too many, but the other three did. Well, Chuck not in 1980, but later.
Kevin says, Coach, how much of an offensive mind is Kirk Ferentz?
I'm not in a good position to say simply because I'm not privy to all those meetings. Kirk knows a lot of football. He knows a lot about football. I think his strength obviously would be offensive line play. Probably has a better handle on the running game than the passing game, simply because, he's never had to be a play caller for the pass. So that's not his specific area of expertise. It's more O-line and running game.
Appreciate this from Vital Transformation. Thank you for the compliment. I again, do appreciate that. Cole says, what do you think of the reverse play call on 3rd and 3?
A reverse? I don't
know
remember.
what he means. I don't think it was a reverse. I think he's just talking about the sweep.
I don't remember the specific play.
Did Iowa run a sweep with Arland on a 3rd and 3?
We ran a fly sweep for a first down kind of late in the game. I remember that. I don't know if there was another fly sweep or not. I don't have the stats in front of me.
James is getting antsy in the chat. James, I have
my bad. Hey, I did not mean to send that. I'm sorry. That was not.
You meant to send it. He says, I'm going to read it for everybody, James. No.
Yeah.
He says, I literally have just like 2 questions. Come on. James.
My bad. I just been waiting on
it. You're good, man. I figured I'd throw you on as soon as you said that. You're good, man.
My bad.
I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
You're good. First off, I don't know if you're watching, but Keegan has 13 points right now. So
how about what a start for him yesterday? 7 of 10 from the field, 19 points, Don, in a debut for Sacramento. That's incredible.
I wasn't aware of that. Good for him. He's a great young man.
But one question I had is I just wanted to know your guys' percent. What is your percentage of you think a quarterback change? You know what I'm saying? What's the percentage you think of each quarterback being thrown out there? So if you had to put a percentage on it now, what's your percentage on Petrus starting? What's your percentage on Petrus starting, and what's your percentage on Padilla starting?
I think it's 60-40 Padilla.
I'll go 50-50.
I just didn't know what you guys' thoughts were on that because for me, did you hear what he said after the game?
I have listened. Don has not.
All right, I'll tell Don what he said. He said that he hopes they put him in the game. So for me, that kind of sounded like he wasn't 100% sure.
You're talking about Alex. You're talking about Alex.
Yeah.
I have not listened to Alex.
Yeah. No, he said so. They asked him a question about just what's his thing for next week or whatever. He's like, I just hope they put me in the game or something like that.
Well, I'm glad he said
So-
that. He should hope that, right?
So
I mean,
like, yeah, but I mean, it's just like for me, it's like he wasn't 100% sure either. You know, which obviously I don't think you are at this rate because you've been passed up how many times? Like he should have won the Nevada game. And the one game I think Don forgot to talk about is the Michigan game. I think he should have won in the Michigan game, like that last drive at least.
well,
You know, when they threw
yeah.
Peaches back out there, at least.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say because I think Padilla should have been in week 1.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. Let's go back to week 1 for a second, Don. I mean, I've never seen anything like week 1. And any other situation, I think you would have seen a team pull the QB, not necessarily on a permanent basis, but clearly these two guys were close last year. I'm shocked they didn't pull him week 1. I'm not shocked, but I think they should have pulled him week 1, James.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, that game was close. Like if they weren't going to change, it was my opinion. Was what I'm saying. Like
Close because of the defense, but
yeah, I know. But I'm saying like, obviously, again, their point, they might not put him in a close game. I was saying like the games that were out of hand already, Nevada, Michigan, he should have probably got in at least some reps in those games. Was my eyes at least. And then the question I have for Don is like, have you ever been in this situation where like have you ever? Because I didn't watch you as much. I'm younger. I'm about the same age as Corey, so like I didn't watch it like back when Hayden was here. But like, was there ever a situation where you felt like I don't know how to explain it. So like a quarterback, like you wish you would have went to a quarterback after you seen the quarterback play again or not?
Honestly, if we had questions about who the better quarterback was, we always tried to solve it. And you've always heard me use this expression, Corey, equal reps against equal position. That's the best way to find out who's better than who. And that can be done. It can be even done in a 3-way race. You might recall years ago, we were playing Tennessee in the Kickoff Classic, and Coach Fry said before the game, I believe he did, we're going to play 3 quarterbacks, 20 minutes apiece. And in the end, the third quarterback is the one that won the job. His name was Chuck Hartley. He was a 2-time All Big Ten quarterback.
Yeah, I heard of him. I just haven't. I'm not old enough to obviously know back then. That's why I was interested in questioning. Like for me, it's why did you watch football? Because I played with some D1 football players in high school. Obviously, my quarterback, even though he was a sophomore, he ended up going to Iowa State. So like for me, it's more like I kind of see it a little bit how like I feel like a D1 quarterback plays, if that makes sense. Because my quarterback in high school was a D1 quarterback at least. So like for me, I just watched Peaches play, and it's kind of like I just always think about my quarterback. Where my quarterback could run a little bit in high school though, so it was a little different, because Peaches can't really run that fast. But my quarterback in high school could always run a little bit, so like it makes a difference. But like I always watched them two play, and I just like the difference. It's like even as a sophomore, I felt like the quarterback I had in high school, like he could make some of the throws that Peaches can't make, and he was a sophomore in high school. Does that make any sense to you or not?
Well, this much is obvious to me, and I think to everyone else. If you have protection issues, that should attach even more value to a quarterback being able to extend plays.
Mm-hmm. And one more
if you have protection problems, he's going to need to be able to do that.
Yeah. One more big question I have is how many times in the last couple of weeks have we started off with that roll out play?
I've seen that play a few times, I'll admit.
So don't you think Ohio State was probably keying in on it, in the first drive at least? That was going to come at some point, and then they saw it in the first play?
I'm not sure what they knew about that particular play, but we have run that play more than a few times, yes.
I feel like maybe that wasn't. I'm not trying to say Brian. I'm not trying to I know we all pick on Brian. We all say he did bad stuff, but for me, it's like you run that play so often that maybe you run it too much. You know what I'm saying? Or throw a wrinkle in there. You know what I mean?
Well, you've heard me say before, one way to improve your offense is for the other team to not have an idea of what play's coming based on formation. So a larger call sheet, a bigger playbook does help. Obviously, the more plays you have, it's hard to zero in on what plays might be coming.
And one more thing, Corey, I was wrong about that first interception yesterday. I said it was close. It wasn't close. I don't know what I was talking about. I was way off.
I don't know either, but we'll let you back into the next show, James.
Yeah, but I was way off about that throw. It was way bad. But I thought it was. I'll try to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but it was not even good enough to be a benefit of the doubt throw. But
you're good.
All right. Yep. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, James. All right.
Which interception was he talking about, Corey? The first one or the second one?
He said the second one was worse than the first. I said they were both bad.
They both defied logic, really. I don't know what he was seeing in either case.
Steve, who's just trolling in the chat. Steve, if you don't like the show, you're welcome to go somewhere else. If you enjoy the show, you're welcome to stay. But just, I don't know if you're looking for attention or what, but maybe I gave it to you. Won't give it to you again. So you're welcome to go somewhere else, Steve, if you're not enjoying the show. Eric says, great show again. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate Coach P's time, and as do I. Hawk Mama, one of our premium subscribers. Thank you, Hawk Mama. And glad to see her positivity on here. Wayfarer of the Wilderness. Again, thank you, Wayfarer of the Wilderness, and your support. Linda had asked this question: does Padilla practice with the starters? You've said the need to practice, get equal snaps against equal competition in practice. We don't really know how much that's happening, Don, but it should be happening, and absolutely should be happening now, right?
I think he was asked sometime recently, maybe after the game even, did you get snaps with the first team? And he simply said, yes, I do. My guess is not very many. Up until now, not very many.
Right. Joel asked the question, what was the end of the Coach Fry era? It feels like the same now with Coach Ferentz. Don, what was that like those last few years? I know it had to have been hard for you and seeing Coach Fry's health decline as well.
Yeah, as you know, he had health issues that the general public didn't know about. And of course, as he got older, it became harder to recruit because other coaches in the Big Ten would acknowledge, yes, he's a great football coach, but how long do you think he can coach? Because in his last year, he was 69 before he retired. So the health issues plus the age made it difficult. And we lost. Here's the reality of what happens. And I'm very proud of the coaching tree that Coach Fry had as a head coach. But obviously, as Coach Fry got older, we had so many good coaches that had opportunities to go be head coaches somewhere else. And they took advantage of those opportunities. And it's difficult to replace a great coach with another great coach. Let's face it, your pool of coaches might not be quite as good at the end of the 20 years as they were toward the start of the 20 years. So we did the best we could. I think we hired some great coaches even in the later years, but other coaches maybe were not as good as the guy they replaced. That made it all more difficult. Those are all considerations as a coach gets older. I made a comment the other day, as a lot of schools, they have coaches that have been in position for a long time. And the obvious question is, how do you know when to ease someone else out and put someone else in? Because you certainly don't want to disrespect anybody that's had years and years of service to you. And certainly Kirk qualifies. Kirk's been a wonderful asset to our athletic department for many, many years. And as you know, he's a great person, one of the finest men I've ever known. So you'd like to think that he alone has a better idea of what the timeline should be going forward than anyone else. And you'd like to think that he'll be given the opportunity to decide when his coaching is done. You know, he's still in good health and he's still got every bit of his mental faculties that he ever had. He's a very bright person and certainly understands the game inside and out. So I'd like to think that he'll have a chance to decide himself when his career is over. And for the sake of so many young players that are in the Iowa program now, I hope it's not too soon because Kirk's a great head coach.
Charles says, do we know who Mikey Gow is? I looked him up because I saw this question. So he's a Bellevue East QB. So he's a Nebraska kid. Excuse me. Looks like he's being recruited by Iowa and a bunch of Power 5 programs. He's a 25 guy, I believe, is what I saw. So I don't know if Iowa will offer. They, of course, have a 24 QB, but they'll do their due diligence for 25. They need to.
Corey, I'll ask the obvious question. Is Charles Long go by the nickname of Chuck by any chance?
Okay, we're gonna move on. Lots of people coming to your defense here, Don, saying how great you are. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I agree. And I'm going to continue to try to shorten things up, and we're coming up on double the amount of time that we originally set for this. I do want to address Berger here, who says, how long until we see What's the Upside shirts in Kinnick? That brings up a good point. If you are interested in merch for From the Hawkeye of the Storm, please let me know. At least comment, send in a live chat. Let me know, because the more interest that I have in that, the more motivation I'm going to have to get that all set up. That is work to get that set up. But I know some people have asked for merch, and I just haven't gotten it done. If you want From the Hawkeye of the Storm merchandise, please let me know.
I have an answer for Berger. My prediction is the What's the Upside T-shirts will show up this Saturday in Kinnick. There'll be a few of them this Saturday.
Be okay with that. Bill says, how can they keep Parker if Brian is making 150% of what Phil is? Bill, that's you got it flipped here. Well, not even flipped. Phil is making more than Brian, like $400,000 or so a year. Brian's making just short of $1 million. I think Phil's around 1.3 million. Thank you for the super chat, though, Bill. Do appreciate that. Vital Transformation with the super chat. Can the coach explain what he thinks is going on with 77? Connor Colby on the O-line. My 9-year-old noticed 4 plays that we had to laugh about together so he wouldn't cry. He looks huge. How can he be that bad? Don, do you want to address Connor? His struggle?
Well, we're trying to figure out. Obviously, Coach Burnett feels he's one of our best 5 players. The only question relating to yesterday is he better suited to be a tackle or a guard? I think the feeling that Coach Burnett had yesterday is maybe we're better off with Kobe playing right guard and Plum playing tackle. Of course, now he has a better idea because he's graded the video now. But I do give Coach Burnett credit for trying to come up with the very best solution involving the 5 best linemen.
Brett says, who are Don's CFP predictions right now? He didn't ask me, so Don, this is a question for you.
Well, I'd like to be optimistic and say both Michigan and Ohio State. I still like Georgia's chances. I still like Alabama's chances, and that must mean that somebody beats Tennessee. At least one somebody, if not 2. It would be healthy I'll say this, it would be healthy for college football if Tennessee was one of those 4 teams, because they had in the 4. And it'd be nice if the Big Ten teams could survive the first round. It'd be something if we had Michigan versus Ohio State as a rematch in the national championship. That would be something to see.
Brian wants merch. Whoops. Brian wants merch. Ari Gold says, what do you think about taking the ball out of the end zone on Saturday? Dolphin and Podolak were not happy about it on the radio. I've been critical the opposite way around. Caleb's not knocked off any big runs. Have you seen anything? How would you evaluate how Caleb Johnson's returning the football on kickoffs, Don?
Caleb had a couple of decent returns on Saturday. I forget how many yards we gained, but maybe around 35 or so. I will say this. I made a note because it brought a smile to my face. Did you notice late in the game that Mr. Bruce fielded a punt on the 6-yard line, I believe it was, and did not fair catch it? And he returned it about 10 yards. I was glad to see that because that at least told me Arlen Bruce is not giving up. He's thinking, I'm going to try to make a play. I will say this, though, on a negative note, there was a punt that hit the ground on the 12-yard line. He chose to let it go. He could have certainly fielded it on the fly. Yeah. I'm talking about fair catching it. That ball was down on the 2-yard line. So it's a bug. It's a sore point with me that a punt that could have been fair caught is allowed to hit the ground. That should not happen.
All right, we're getting closer, Don. Promise the finish line's in sight. Emil, appreciate the super chat. If Kirk were to step down after the season, do you have a list of coaches that you would want to have? Yes, I do, Emil. This is a topic I actually love talking about, not because I want Kirk Ferentz gone, but because I think there are some viable candidates out there. And I'll say this. I'm going to save that for a future segment. I've talked about that before on the show. Brett Bielema is certainly on the list. Some guy with the last name Stoops would be on my list. And how about a guy that's currently on the staff and his name is not LeVar Woods? But I'll talk about that in a future show. Don, do you want to comment on that at all? Again, not pushing Kirk out, but is there anybody who you think the best candidates for a job like this would be?
I'd rather not say right now because I don't know who deserves to be at the top of the list. But I'll say this is such a good job that when that time comes, whenever that might be, it'll be an impressive list of coaches that want to at least consider being Iowa's coach. That just says so much about our fans and about the loyalty we have for Iowa football here in the state of Iowa.
Appreciate this compliment from Josh. Daniel, nobody's talking about this, but what about getting new O-line and wide receiver position coaches? Both of these people are from the MAC, and they both appear to stink. Daniel, let me defend George Barnett for a second. He's been here less than 2 years. Now, Kelton Copeland deserves criticism because that wide receiver room's not very good. Now, they've been decimated by injury, but they're struggling to recruit, Don, and part of that's got to be on the position coach, but part of that's just on the fact that the offense is not very attractive to wide receivers. Charlie Jones was underutilized. It appears that Kelton Copeland perhaps helped to develop Charlie into what he is now. I don't think he went to Purdue and all of a sudden became an amazing wide receiver. I think he was underutilized. Now, maybe that's Kelton Copeland not transmitting good messages, good information back to the coaches that make these playing time decisions. But I think George Barnett deserves another year at least because this is a developmental position along that offensive line. But the Kelton Copeland one is tough because they need more production from wide receiver, and there's criticism to go around on that one, Don.
Yeah, I agree with you.
OS for Hawks, please dye the gray hair. I don't think I have any gray hair, Don. I have gray hair. Maybe
he's talking to me. I need to dye my gray hair.
Last time I checked, my name's Corey, Don. Your name is Don. Ryan says, Don, can Brian implement contingency planning during practice for various in-game situations?
Yes, absolutely.
Boy, you are taking the word rapid fire seriously. I like it. You want to get out of here. James, one more question for Don. Does it ever make you wonder why we don't roll out our QB more often? It seems to me like we have more success with those types of plays. They need to do that with Alex, right, Don? Get him on the run. To me, that makes more sense to get him on rollouts.
Yeah, it's healthy to move the launch pad around a little bit. And there's a lot of different ways to get outside, but the two basic ways, out of the gun is simply to sprint in the direction you want to work, change the angles for the flight of the ball. Sometimes a man defender thinks he's in great shape, but what he fails to realize, of course, he's focused on the receiver. What he doesn't realize is the quarterback is no longer standing in the pocket. He's on the edge of the formation, and that makes all the difference. So we need to continue with nakeds. If we're going to roll to our left and run sprint passes to our left, we should run naked to the left also. I think that would fool teams because we're much more inclined to run naked to the right.
Appreciate this from Michelle. She says, love listening to your chat and really learning about football. Very sad to see Iowa losing games. I think it's dynasty, but destiny that Brian is the OC. Appreciate you being here, Michelle. And I would echo the same things, Don. I learn a lot from you on a regular basis. Jason says, Coach Hayden had assistants that he wanted to aspire to be head coaches. Kirk doesn't appear to have that. Is there a difference in hiring those types of guys, good or bad?
Well, I just know how Coach Fry thought. He always said, I don't want to hire a coach if he doesn't aspire to become someday a head coach. And I think he was simply of the opinion, those are the coaches that are going to take great pride in what they do, that are going to work as many hours as it takes, that are going to be team players, and that are always going to be able to be counted on to do their part to put us in position to win each and every game. That's how Coach Fry thought. That's one reason we had a lot of coaches to go on and do great things, is because in his mind, a lot of us were destined to become head coaches.
Hawkeye Howard, Coach, do we need to change all the coaches on the offensive side of the board?
I think that would be unfair to our running back coach who hadn't been here very long. And
I agree.
Our offensive line coach, of course, is a young guy too.
By the way, somebody earlier said this is the first time we've been embarrassed in quite some time. Don, I thought the Big Ten championship was an embarrassment. 42-3. I thought the Wisconsin game in Madison last year was an embarrassment. And hey, I thought the Purdue game at home last year was an embarrassment. Iowa got embarrassed several times last year. Those are embarrassing results.
We had only 4 losses, but 3 of them were pretty convincing losses.
Jordan says, I know there are more serious issues. In any case, what did you think of the special teams on Saturday? Good from kickoffs and good on field goals. Drew Stevens stepping up right now, Don, but the rest of special teams, including Torrey Taylor, struggled a bit.
Well, you've heard me say before, I think we might we might win the kicking game just about every game of the year. I can't say that we won the kicking game on Saturday simply because their field goal kicker was 100%, as I recall. We did okay in terms of coverage and all that. We didn't have many kicks to cover, of course, from a kickoff standpoint. I think you'd have to give them the edge in the kicking game, if only because they had all those made field goals and a big failure with our punt that we pulled down and ran.
Appreciate the super thanks from Steve. Thank you, Steve, for the contribution. Always appreciate it, and it does help the channel. So thank you very much. Richard says Coach Don has the NCAA limited practice hours in recent years. Northwestern and Iowa probably the best at developing linemen. They are both struggling in recent years, and these restrictions may contribute.
Well, we used to have, I bet they still have it. There's a 20-hour rule that only allows you to occupy a young man's time for 20 hours in a week. I should say on the field practice time. Weight training does count as part of that 20 hours, and the game itself counts as part of those 20 hours. So NCAA will not allow you to spend all kinds of inordinate amount of time with your players from week to week. You don't have that opportunity. That's why you got to be highly organized in your meetings and be able to make the practice time as worthwhile as possible.
Trina says, enjoy Don's perspective. So much experience to draw from. But Don, by the way, I don't know if it's because a couple people were critical earlier, but a lot of people, more different names than normal that I'm seeing in here complimenting you. And I don't know that we've had a Sunday show. And again, I apologize for going late. I appreciate you being on here for as long as you have. We've got 330 people still on at 10 o'clock on a Sunday. And this is like, for me, this is like hour 5, hour 6 of doing post-game coverage of this Ohio State game. I appreciate all the support, but Don, you get credit for this, getting fans.
Well, that's a testament to you too, Corey, because you're every bit as much involved as I am.
Well, I appreciate that. Corey and Don, Spaceboy74 says, Corey and Don, would you take 2012 James Vandenberg or 22 Spencer Petras? I would take 2012 James Vandenberg. Let's not forget that James Vandenberg had a ridiculously good 2011 year if you look at the numbers. And I think he was a product of a bad system. Not to say the system's good now, but boy, it took some time to implement the Greg Davis era. And it was never great here. I understand that, people were critical of it, but boy, I'd rather Greg Davis right now calling plays. So I personally would take 2012 James Vandenberg. And Don, that's not a fair question to you because you were coaching in 2012, correct?
Right. I simply never saw much of Vandenberg.
Aesthetic girl, Keegan Johnson. I don't think he's going to play. I don't think we're going to see him the rest of the year, Don, but that seems to be a subject that Kirk Ferentz does not like talking about. I'll just say that. I like this. Mike says, okay, Mark Rogers is live now. Good night. He's heading over there. I love it. I love the fact that me and Mark can compete for viewership. That signals that we need to head out of here. And Kenneth says, is Coach Ferentz losing the locker room? I don't think so, Don. If anybody's going to keep a locker room together, it'd be him. But I can see why you'd question that with the discrepancy between the defense and offense.
Well, you've heard me say before, the one thing I'm sure of is the character of our players is as good as any in all of college football. So those guys are discouraged, but they're not ever going to give up. In that regard, I don't worry about them being ready to play next week. I think they'll be ready all over again.
DC Hawk, appreciate the super chat. Great show again, Coach and Corey. I was pretty surprised that there was a QB change. I think it is an indication that there is some heat on Brian Ferentz to change course. I agree that the whole offensive coaching staff needs to be replaced. Thank you, DC Hawk. I always appreciate hearing from you and appreciate the contribution. C Hawkeyes says, have you heard Barta's comments to that O's? I don't know what that means. I did read some of the comments to the Cleveland.com reporter that he made. Perhaps that's what's being referenced here. And yeah, if anybody hasn't read that article, I encourage you to go to Cleveland.com as well. That was well written. Erica Goldberg, appreciate the super chat, Erica. Does anyone else think they brought in Alex yesterday to say, told you so? We brought him and it didn't work. I hope that's not the case, Erica, and we'll see. The proof is in the pudding about who starts on Saturday.
I would simply say, Erica, you're wise beyond your years.
Eric says if they start Padilla and he really struggles all game, try Labus. What do they have to lose? Their total offensive rating. James says, Corey, what did you think about having Drew Tate or Ricky Stanzi coming back as QB's coach? You know, Don, it's funny. He says this. I don't know about Ricky Stanzi. I don't think he's been coaching. But Drew Tate, we all thought he was getting hired as QB's coach at UNI. Somebody brought this to my attention. You go on the UNI website, Don. He's the tight ends coach. Are you aware of this?
I may be doing the UNI game at Southern Illinois next weekend.
Well, I want you to talk. Are you doing the sideline work again, or are they having you down on the sideline?
No, in the booth as an analyst.
Okay, because I was hoping you could maybe find Drew Tate and report back.
No, I'll be in the booth.
Have you know Drew? Have you ever met Drew?
If I did, it was only briefly as a player, for a few minutes. So I don't really know him at all.
YouTube sucks. If asked, would Don accept a coaching job at Iowa? Don, would you come out of retirement to coach again?
I'll be 72 years old on December 10th. That's probably too old to be a college football coach.
Jamie says, does Iowa finish with a winning record? I'm going to say, here's my prediction. My prediction's no. Don, I don't. If you get to 6-6, maybe they win a bowl game, but I'm going to say no.
Let's see, that means we'd have to win 4 out of 5. Is that right? No. 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. That's doable.
And well, then you got to win a bowl game too to get to have a winning.
We're 3-4, right? So
right. We have 3 out of 5 and then win a bowl game.
Right. To go 7-6. Yeah. Yeah, that's doable. I think we have a chance to do it.
Appreciate this very kind compliment from Burger, and I appreciate it. Burger says, enjoy Corey while you can. I've tried to do things on a similar scale, makes it look easy. Thank you. I appreciate that. I certainly don't think when you say destined for big things that I'll be flattered by that. But I very much humbly accept that compliment. Thank you very much. Corey Hussing, thank you for becoming the newest member to our channel. And that, again, thank you, Corey. Kevin asked the same question. I want to support Corey's channel. How do I become a premium subscriber? We figured out if you're on an iPhone, you may have to sign in on your desktop, Kevin. There should be a little join button next to the channel name, and you can do it that way. For some reason, iOS is behind on that. Eric, yes, link. I believe there's a link in the description. You'll find it, Kevin. Do some digging. You'll find it. I promise. Jim, thank you for the super thanks. Jim Knapp here with the contribution. Thank you, Jim. Casey wants a wrestling show. Casey, I'm not a wrestling guy. I've tried here and there, but I am not a wrestling guy. I had some guy call me out for being a fraud last year when I did one wrestling post-duel show, and I said, forget it. I'm not a wrestling guy. So, look, if there's, if we have sponsorship, I'd be happy to explore making that available one way or the other, but I would probably not be the guy to be an analyst. If I could bring on a wrestling analyst, that'd be great. But I can't pursue that. Just don't have time to pursue that unless there's sponsorship money. And if you want to sponsor the show, again, I've said this over and over again, whatever show, we've got Coach Gary Close coming back for another season. Don, I know you think very highly of Coach Gary Close. You were at Iowa at the same time he was. If you want to sponsor that show or our show with Coach Patterson, reach out to me from the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. And of course, if you want to, if you want to contribute, if you're not in a position to sponsor, look, spread the word that we're looking for sponsors. That would help as well. Talk to your insurance agent, talk to your local grocer, whatever the case may be. Helps the channel to grow. Dependent Fanatic says, Don, who will win, OSU or Michigan?
They're playing the shoe. I would go with Ohio State.
Care to expound on why briefly?
Michigan absolutely has a good chance to beat them. I think it'll be a one-score game.
Wow. Okay. Spaceboy74, thank you for being here. Appreciate the compliment. Erica Goldberg, as always, thank you. And I believe that's good. ZTHEISS says Don analyzes wrestling, right?
Don't know much about wrestling. I did wrestle at West Point. Your play bureau as a freshman, you have 4 PE classes, if you can imagine this, Corey. Wrestling, boxing, gymnastics, and survival swimming. And I almost drowned in survival swimming because I was an average swimmer. I was actually a good boxer because it was weight and I had pretty long arms. So that gave me a chance to be a good boxer. But that's the only time in my life that I ever wrestled. And I was okay at wrestling too, but not so much with swimming. I was an average swimmer. And I thought I might drown a few times, but I survived.
Don, you're going to probably persecute me later, but we just hit the 3-hour mark. So I appreciate you sticking through this and working with me as we tried to and you understand why you understand where I come from. You know, we both want to hear from the fans, and you know, we want to give courtesy to everybody, but again, we appreciate everybody being reasonable and flexible with keeping their calls short, and we'll continue to work on that because we want the show to grow, right? We want more people to be involved. We enjoy other people outside the fan base, but it does take time. And so we appreciate your time, Don.
Well, Corey, I've said this before to you. I don't know if I said it on the air, but this is my way of giving back to our fan base. You know, I was lucky enough to coach Iowa football for 20 years, and since it occupied a lot of my adult life, I'm certainly grateful to still be involved with an opportunity to talk about Iowa football.
Corey says I misspell my first name. I don't see too many Corys with a K, frankly. But I appreciate Corey being a member to Corey's channel and for supporting it. And everybody else, again, Ari Gold, Michael, thank you all for being here. A reminder, folks, yes, Iowa losing this game 54-10. We'll be back next week, Iowa Northwestern. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel here from the Hawkeye of the Storm if you've not done so, or if you're watching on our Iowa at the Voice of College Football channel, subscribe. Hit that like button on the way out. That helps. If you know somebody who wants to sponsor the show, please reach out to me from the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. Whether we're talking about our postgame show with Don, our postgame show with Coach Gary Close, please reach out to me from the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. This coming Wednesday, myself and you, the caller, you, the Hawkeye fan, will be live once again, as we are every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central Time, live edition, live call-in show, Northwestern Week, Hawkeye Hangout Live, an Iowa football team that is 3-4. Follow me on Twitter in the meantime, at From the Hawkeye. You can like the Facebook page. We need to grow that Facebook page, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, on Facebook. Sharing the show out on social media is always appreciated as well. That does help the channel to grow, and supporting by means of becoming a premium subscriber. Click the join button next to From the Hawkeye of the Storm to do that. And remember, you can donate. I know I've said this every time, and you may just go through one ear and out the other, but donating to the channel is very helpful. I hate to bring it up. I feel bad bringing it up at times because we have people that donate by Super Chat, but it does help the channel. So if you want to donate by means of Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, there are links in the description below in this video. So, folks, we'll be back with Mark Rogers this coming on the Iowa at the Voice of College Football channel. We'll be back with him on Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Myself and Mark Rogers talking about Iowa and Northwestern. And then again, back on Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central Time for Hawkeye Hangout. Coach Patterson, you're a treasure. Thank you, sir, and we'll talk to you next Saturday.
Thank you, Corey.